The police burst into my home with urgent news. We've transported a child found in a car registered under your name. You're under arrest. Shocked by their sudden arrival, I struggled to comprehend. What? I don't have a child, I blurted out in confusion. The officer appeared equally bewildered, explaining they had identified the car's owner through the license plate. My name was on record. Could this be some terrible misunderstanding? Frantic with worry, I rushed to the hospital where the child had been taken. There, a 5-year-old boy lay on an emergency bed, his face flushed and marked with distress. Yet despite his condition, a surge of recognition and concern washed over me at the sight of his familiar features. From that moment, my life took an unexpected turn with this child at its heart. My name is Emily, aged 33, working from home. I met my husband Michael in college where we bonded over shared interests in a club, eventually marrying after graduation. Despite our decade-long marriage, we struggled with infertility. Despite treatments, my condition made conceiving difficult. Michael, always kind-hearted, reassured me. It's all right, let's focus on being happy together. My in-laws are wonderful people. They never pressured me about having children, especially since my brother-in-law already had a child of his own. However, I couldn't help but feel guilty for my own parents who eagerly awaited grandchildren. Thankfully, living close by, I made sure to visit them often. If only John had a child. I have a younger brother named John, 7 years my junior. Despite our parents treating us equally, John felt overshadowed by my achievements and intelligence. He drifted towards troublesome friends during middle school, rebelling against any comparison to his older sister. By the age of 20, he cut ties with our family, vanishing without a trace. Sometimes I leaf through old photo albums, reminiscing about John toddling after me as a toddler, calling me sis. One day, while working from home, my doorbell incessantly rang. Panicked, I checked the camera feed to see police officers at my doorstep. Abruptly, they announced, "We've brought a child found in a car. You're under arrest." Shocked and speechless, I stammered, "What? I don't have a child." The officer seemed as bewildered as I was. In that moment, my mind raced with unanswered questions. According to the police, a passerby noticed an abandoned car on the road with a child inside, reported it, and the child was rushed to the emergency room by ambulance. When I inquired about the car's location, I was stunned to learn it was parked in front of my parents' house, though they were currently away on a trip. The police traced the car's owner via its license plate, confirming it was registered under my name. However, the person using it was my younger brother, John. I used to lend my car to John, who had recently obtained his license, and he took it when he left home. Since then, the car had remained parked in front of my parents' house, brought out only for necessary inspections and maintenance. Despite my parents' scolding, they maintained the vehicle out of sympathy, believing John might still need it. But who was the child left alone in the car? Rushing to the hospital, I approached the emergency room bed where a small head peeked out from under a blanket, its curly, wavy hair strikingly familiar. My heart raced as memories of John's childhood flashed through my mind. Drawing closer, I saw the face of a boy around 4 or 5 years old, bearing a remarkable resemblance to John. Could it be this child? Before I could finish my thought, a panicked phone call from my mother, still away on her trip, interrupted my thoughts. John called me in a panic, asking me to look after his child. He explained he left the child in the car because we weren't home and it was scorching outside. What should we do? I reassured the distressed mother that the child had already been taken to the hospital and was expected to recover. Relieved, she promised to return soon. Understanding my mother's urgency to return, I pondered about this child who clearly belonged to my brother. Questions raced through my mind. When was he born, and who is his mother? I informed the police he's likely my brother's child, and committed to staying with him. Despite repeated attempts, I couldn't reach my brother on the phone. As I watched the child, his small body seemed to endure so much pain. A nurse approached and handed me his clothes, which were ragged and heavily soiled, with the name Tom on the tag. Seeing his extreme thinness and the condition of his clothes, it was evident Tom had endured a harsh upbringing in impoverished conditions. That evening, my mother returned from her trip and hurried to the hospital. "John," she whispered tearfully, embracing Tom, who bore a striking resemblance to my brother. By the following day, Tom's condition had improved, though he appeared visibly frightened. I gently reassured him, trying not to alarm him further. "How old are you, Tom?" I asked softly. 5 years old, he replied, holding up his hand and counting his fingers. "Wow, you speak so clearly. I remarked, impressed by his articulation. I praised Tom and gently stroked his head, finally coaxing a smile from his pale, thin face. Despite his frail appearance, he seemed to brighten up in response. The doctor informed us of bruises covering his body. I persuaded the police to let us care for Tom until we could reach John, skillfully avoiding an official report. 3 days later, Tom was discharged from the hospital. Unwilling to see him in his worn-out clothes, I bought him new ones which made him look even more charming and bright. As we prepared to leave the hospital, I managed to reach John on the phone amidst a chaotic background noise. How could you leave him in the car under the hot sun? He was taken to the hospital, but he survived, thankfully. I confronted him. He had bruises all over his body. Did you do this? Thomas is clumsy. I was just trying to discipline him, John retorted, his tone devoid of remorse, leaving me speechless. He's only 5 years old. He's slow, can't even remember his letters, no matter how many times I teach him. It's frustrating, so I left him at our parents' place. I was appalled by my brother's harsh treatment of his son. Concerned for Tom's well-being under such parenting, John callously added, I'm in the middle of a casino jackpot right now, before abruptly hanging up. Witnessing Tom's worried expression, tears welled up silently as I reassured him with a gentle stroke. Everything will be okay. He's just 5. It's natural for him to cry and seek comfort, yet he remains silent. His lack of calling out for his parents tugged at my heart, prompting painful thoughts. After discussing with Michael and our parents, we resolved to care for Tom in our home. Back at home, I prepared a children's lunch of hamburgers and fries adorned with colorful character flags. When I set it in front of Tom, his eyes lit up in wonder. I've never had anything like this before. Can I really eat it? Of course, Tom. It's all for you, I assured him, delighted by his messy enjoyment, ketchup smudged on his cheeks, and a joyful grin on his face. In the evening, Tom giggled and splashed around in the bath with Michael, thoroughly enjoying himself. At bedtime, I nestled beside him, reading picture books. He listened attentively with bright eyes, yet occasionally a hint of worry clouded his expression. Can I stay here forever? I don't want to go back home, he asked me suddenly, his voice tinged with uncertainty. I understand. You want to stay here, don't you? I asked gently. Tom nodded with visible relief, and my heart ached to see him in such a vulnerable state. In the days that followed, he grew increasingly attached to Michael and me. He eagerly offered to help fold laundry or carry bags when we went shopping, his small frame determined and eager to contribute. Living together, I discovered what a kind and wonderful child Tom was. Both Michael and I grew deeply fond of him, leading us to discuss the possibility of adopting him, especially if John and his partner had no plans to raise him. Upon checking with the city office, I learned that Tom's birth had been registered by my brother and his wife, and they were listed on the residence certificate as living with Tom at our parents' house. We began consulting with family court about the next steps. About a month after Tom came to live with us, John and a young woman arrived for a visit. Thanks for taking care of Tom, she greeted us warmly. As soon as Tom saw them, he instinctively sought refuge behind me, clearly uneasy. It was evident he had endured unsettling experiences. My brother, whom I hadn't seen in years, appeared more assertive than before, dressed unkemptly, signaling troubled times. The young woman with him introduced herself as Risa, adorned with multiple ear and nose piercings, exuding a flashy, carefree aura. How did you find out where I live? I questioned, feeling uneasy. Hey sis, Mom, looks like you're living the good life in this nice house, huh? John remarked casually. I need to talk about Tom. Let us in. Reluctantly, I agreed, unable to refuse when Tom's well-being was at stake. According to my brother, he had married Risa shortly after leaving home. They had lived a transit lifestyle, often staying in their car due to lack of stable accommodation. As John looked around our home, he finally came to the point. I heard from Mom that you don't have children, right? After 10 years of marriage with no kids, it must be tough, John remarked casually. What are you suggesting? I asked, sensing an underlying motive. We have a proposal. How about taking Tom off our hands? Of course, it won't come cheap, John replied nonchalantly. I was taken aback by his audacity, trying to sell his own son after earlier abandoning him at our parents because of inconvenience. Anger surged within me. John, do you even see your child as a human being? He's not something you can just sell. What? Acting all self-righteous now. I rebelled because of your strictness. Our parents always favored you. It's ridiculous how you blame us for your failures, John retorted defiantly. Shut up. Just give me the money, I snapped back, infuriated. John raised his hand threateningly, poised to strike me. Suddenly, Tom, who had been hiding behind me, stepped forward. He stretched out his arms, trying to shield me from John's aggression. Witnessing Tom's brave gesture only strengthened my resolve to protect him. Selling a child for money was inconceivable. Despite my anger, I decided to offer them the $13,400 I had saved as a settlement. I made them sign an agreement stating they would never interfere with Tom again and obtained their consent for his adoption. John's wife callously remarked, "It's a relief not to have to deal with such a troublesome child," shocking me with her indifference. After the formalities were settled, they greedily took the money, sneered, and vanished. From that moment, Tom truly became our son, and we finalized all the necessary legal procedures. The ensuing days overflowed with joy. Tom thrived in health, and our lives as a couple were brimming with smiles and happiness because of him. During this time, we discovered Tom's talents and were eager to nurture them. Yet 15 years later, another unexpected encounter unfolded. Once more, my younger brother and his wife paid us a visit. John sported a scruffy beard, unkempt hair, and appeared much older than his 41 years. His wife, without makeup, wore worn-out clothes and torn plastic sandals. It was evident they had fallen on hard times, living a rough existence. An uneasy feeling settled over me as they appeared unexpectedly, knowing their visit couldn't bode well, especially with my dependable husband Michael away at work that day. "What do you want?" I asked cautiously. "I need some money," John replied bluntly. "Why should I give you money?" I countered, wary of his intentions. "I heard Tom, that idiot, managed to get into a prestigious medical school," John remarked, his disdain evident. It seemed he had learned about Tom's achievements from someone in our neighborhood at a local tavern. In reality, Tom is incredibly bright. He's been at the top of his class since elementary school and recently secured a spot at a prestigious medical school straight out of high school. "Why is that any concern of yours now?" I asked sharply. "It's a big deal. He's my son, and since he's turned out so well, I think I'll take him back," John declared with a smirk. "What?" I exclaimed, stunned by his audacity. "If you think I'll agree to that, how about you demand $33,500? Sister, didn't I already receive $13,400 from you 15 years ago? John retorted. "That's a different situation. I can't give you that kind of money," I replied firmly. When I firmly declined, John seized my collar and threatened me, his grip tight and menacing. The pain I felt was more emotional than physical as I looked at my estranged brother in dismay. Just as tension escalated, a voice interrupted with a shout, "Stop," and forcefully grabbed John's arm. It was Tom, now a sturdy 20-year-old, who easily subdued John, pinning him to the floor. Seeing Tom grown up, John's wife spoke in a saccharine tone. "You've grown so much. I'm your mother. I've missed you." But Tom responded firmly, "My only parents are the ones in this house. I remember what you did to me when I was 5. I felt love for the first time here. You are not my parents." Even after Tom's declaration, they persisted. I then produced the agreement we made 15 years ago. It explicitly stated, "We will have no further involvement with the child. Failure to comply will result in legal action." "You've broken your promise. I'm calling the police," I declared firmly. They looked visibly shaken, scrambling to make excuses, claiming they had completely forgotten about the agreement. In truth, we're being hounded by debt collectors. Without $33,500, we're in serious trouble, John pleaded, his tone now desperate after earlier threats. "Don't expect sympathy from me. I can't help you," I responded coldly. "The day you abandoned Tom, you lost any claim to my support. I don't have a brother anymore." "I'm sorry, but no," I replied coldly, refusing to enable his actions any further. As their persistence pushed me to consider involving the police, they reluctantly departed. Later, I learned that the couple had been apprehended for shoplifting and were serving time in jail, their lives evidently in turmoil. Meanwhile, Michael, Tom, and I enjoyed a peaceful and joyful existence together. Tom's aspiration to become a doctor, driven by a desire to alleviate suffering, filled me with immense pride and happiness. Reflecting on our life, Tom's presence had brought laughter and contentment into our days. We looked forward to continuing our happy life together.
The day my breakthrough discovery coincided with my divorce papers being finalized, I knew the universe had a twisted sense of humor. I stared at the petri dish under the microscope, my hands trembling as I processed what I was seeing. After 3 years of research, countless sleepless nights, and one devastating betrayal, I'd finally done it. My name is Michaela, and I'm a microbiologist who just discovered a potential treatment for an aggressive form of lymphoma. But 2 years ago, I was just Ethan's wife, the woman who supposedly couldn't handle his entrepreneurial spirit and visionary mindset. "Michaela, you need to see this!" Matteo burst into my lab waving his tablet. "The results from the second trial are even better than we expected." I looked up from my microscope, forcing myself to focus on the present. "Show me." He slid the tablet across my desk, his excitement palpable. "The cellular regeneration rate is unprecedented. This could be revolutionary." "I know." I smiled, but my phone buzzed, displaying my lawyer's name. "Give me a minute." Matteo nodded and stepped out. I answered the call, my heart racing. "It's done," my lawyer said. "The divorce is final. Ethan didn't contest any of the terms." Of course he didn't. He was too busy with Luna, his new girlfriend, and their shared vision for his company. The same company he'd built using my family's connections, the ones who'd chosen his side when everything fell apart. My sister Josephine's words still rang in my ears. "You're just jealous of his success, Michaela. He's building something amazing, and you're too focused on your little lab experiments to see it." Little lab experiments. I glanced at the groundbreaking results on my screen and let out a bitter laugh. "Michaela," Matteo poked his head back in, "the team's waiting for the briefing." I straightened my lab coat and followed him to the conference room. 6 eager faces looked up at me, ready to hear about our progress. This was my real family now, the ones who'd believed in me when everyone else hadn't. "Today," I began, "we've achieved something remarkable." As I presented our findings, my phone buzzed repeatedly. Text messages from Josephine. "Can we talk? It's about Ethan. Please, it's important." I ignored them all. After the presentation, Violet, our lead researcher, cornered me in the hallway. "You're distracted today. Everything okay?" Divorce papers came through. She squeezed my arm. "Want to grab dinner? Talk about it?" Actually, yes. I needed someone who understood. Someone who hadn't been charmed by Ethan's smooth talking and empty promises. At the small Italian restaurant around the corner, I finally let myself break down. You know what's funny? He always said my work was a waste of time, that I should focus on supporting his dreams instead. Violet poured more wine. "Men like that can't stand when women outshine them. How's your family taking it?" "Still radio silent except for Josephine's texts today. Probably wants money." I stabbed at my pasta. "They all bought into his lies. Mum even remortgaged her house to invest in his company. And now? Now I have a breakthrough that could change lives, and they're not here to see it." I took a deep breath. But maybe that's for the best. My phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from our department head. "Urgent meeting tomorrow. Major pharmaceutical company interested in your research. Bring full documentation." Violet read the email over my shoulder and grinned. Now that's karma. "It's more than that." I felt a smile tugging at my lips. "It's validation." Later that night, alone in my apartment, I allowed myself to really feel it all. The triumph, the vindication, the lingering hurt. My laptop screen showed a news article about Ethan's company, promising revolutionary tech solutions. The comments section was full of investors asking questions about delayed products and missed deadlines. My phone buzzed one final time. A text from an unknown number. "Michaela, it's Luna. We need to talk about Ethan. Please." I deleted the message without responding and opened my research files instead. Tomorrow would be a big day, and I needed to be ready. Not for Ethan, not for my family, but for myself and the patients who could benefit from my work. As I reviewed my documentation, another email came through, this time from the pharmaceutical company itself. The numbers they were proposing made my head spin. More zeros than I'd ever seen. I thought about Ethan's face if he knew. About Josephine's dismissive words, about my mother's blind faith in the wrong person. But mostly I thought about the patients in our trials who were already showing improvement. That was the real victory. Not the revenge, not the money, but the lives we could save. I closed my laptop and smiled. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about proving them wrong by succeeding beyond their wildest expectations. 2 years flew by in a blur of clinical trials, research papers, and increasingly promising results. I was in the middle of reviewing our latest data when Matteo rushed into my office, his face flushed with excitement. "Have you seen the news?" He thrust his phone at me. "Your ex-husband's company is under investigation for fraud." I took the phone, scanning the headline. Tech startup under SEC investigation. Investors allege misuse of funds. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little satisfied, I admitted, handing the phone back. A little? Matteo raised an eyebrow. The man nearly destroyed you, and now his house of cards is falling apart just as your treatment is about to hit the market. Before I could respond, Violet burst in. "Emergency meeting in the conference room. The FDA just fast-tracked our approval process." The next hour was a whirlwind of congratulations and planning. Our treatment had shown such promising results that the FDA was pushing it through at record speed. As I stood at the head of the conference table, outlining our next steps, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Finally, during a break, I checked it. 15 missed calls from Josephine, 10 from my mother, and several from numbers I didn't recognize. "Your family finally remembering you exist?" Violet asked, noticing my frown. Funny how that works, isn't it? I silenced my phone. 2 years of silence, and now they can't stop calling. Back in my office, I listened to one of Josephine's voicemails. "Michaela, please, you have to help us. Mom's about to lose everything. Ethan, he..." "Just call me back, okay?" "You're not actually going to call her back, are you?" Matteo asked from the doorway. "I don't know." I rubbed my temples. "Part of me wants to ignore them like they ignored me, but you're not them," he finished. "That's why you're succeeding while they're failing." My computer pinged with a new email, another major hospital wanting to participate in our trials. The contrast between my rising success and Ethan's collapse wasn't lost on me. "Dr. Warner?" My assistant poked her head in. "There's someone here to see you. Says she's your sister." I exchanged looks with Matteo. "Send her in." Josephine looked nothing like the polished, confident woman who told me I was jealous and small-minded 2 years ago. Her designer clothes were wrinkled, her makeup smudged. "5 minutes," I said, gesturing to a chair. "Michaela, She started, then burst into tears. "Everything's falling apart. Ethan's company. It was all fake. The technology never worked. He used Mom's money, my money, everyone's money. And now you need my help?" I kept my voice neutral. "Your treatment. It's worth millions. The patents alone could save us. Mom's going to lose her house, and I had to pull my kids out of private school and..." "Stop." I held up my hand. "Let me get this straight. You're here because you want me to use my success. The work you called a waste of time, to bail out Ethan." "Not Ethan," she protested. "Mom, me, the kids. Please, Michaela." Matteo cleared his throat. "I'll give you two some privacy." After he left, I leaned back in my chair. Where was this concern for family when Ethan was spreading lies about me? When you all cut me out? "I was wrong," Josephine whispered. "We were all wrong. I'm so sorry." My phone buzzed again. Another hospital CEO wanting to discuss implementation. The irony wasn't lost on me. "I need time to think," I said finally. "This isn't just about money. There are patients counting on this treatment." "I understand." Josephine stood, wiping her eyes. "But please, just think about Mom." After she left, Violet found me staring out my office window. "You okay?" "Did you know our treatment could help lymphoma patients increase their survival rate by 60%? I turned to face her. "That's not just numbers. That's people getting to see their kids grow up. And now your family wants to use that to fix their mistakes." "Exactly." I picked up a photo from my desk. Me with my research team, all of us grinning after our first successful trial. They chose Ethan's empty promises over my real work. Now they want me to compromise that work to save them. My phone buzzed yet again. This time it was Ethan's number. "Don't answer it," Violet warned. "I won't." I declined the call. "But I need to figure out what to do about all this." "You don't owe them anything," she reminded me. "I know." I looked at the latest trial results on my screen. But this treatment isn't about revenge. It's about helping people. As if on cue, my assistant appeared again. "Dr. Warner, the parents of one of our trial patients are here. They want to thank you personally." I stood up, straightening my lab coat. "Send them in. This is what really matters." But as I prepared to meet them, Ethan's text flashed on my phone. "We need to talk. Everything's not what it seems. Please." I turned my phone face down. Whatever drama Ethan and my family were involved in would have to wait. I had lives to save first. The next morning I arrived at work to find my mother sitting in my office. She looked older, more worn than I remembered, her usually perfect hair showing streaks of grey. "How did you get in here?" I asked, setting down my coffee. "Your assistant. I told her I was your mother." She stood, wringing her hands. "Michaela, we need to talk about what's happening." "What's happening is I have a meeting in 20 minutes with the hospital board." I checked my watch. "So, make it quick." "Josephine told me she came to see you yesterday." She took a shaky breath. "There's more you need to know. Ethan. He didn't just take our money. He took everything." Matteo appeared in the doorway, folders in hand, but stopped when he saw my mother. I waved him in. "Whatever you need to say, you can say in front of Matteo. He's been here for me when my family wasn't." My mother flinched but continued. "The FBI is investigating him. They're saying he ran a Ponzi scheme, that none of the technology ever existed. He used new investor money to pay old investors, and when that dried up..." "He moved on to family money," I finished. "I'm not surprised. That's what con men do." "Your father's pension," she whispered. "Our savings, the house, even your cousin's college fund. We all believed in him." "No," I corrected her. "You all believed him over me. There's a difference." Matteo cleared his throat. "Dr. Warner, the board is gathering early." "I'll be right there." I turned back to my mother. "I have to go." "Please." She grabbed my arm. "Just look at this first." She handed me a stack of papers. Bank statements, legal notices, foreclosure warnings. My stomach turned as I saw the numbers. "Mom, I can't..." "Your treatment," she interrupted. "The pharmaceutical companies are offering millions. We could make this right." "Make this right?" I laughed bitterly. "You want me to use my life's work, the work you all dismissed, to fix Ethan's crimes?" "To help your family," she pleaded. Before I could respond, Violet burst in. "Michaela, you need to see this now." She turned on the office TV. Ethan's face filled the screen, standing outside a courthouse. He looked haggard, his usual confident smile replaced by desperation. "I maintain my innocence," he was saying to reporters. "These allegations are false. Our technology works. We just need more time." "Turn it off," I said quietly. My mother was crying now. "He told us he had buyers lined up. Major companies ready to invest billions. Like the way he told everyone I was unstable, that I was sabotaging his work out of jealousy." I gathered my files for the board meeting. "I have to go." "Michaela, please." "I'll think about it," I said, not looking at her. "But right now I have actual work to do." The board meeting was a triumph. Our treatment success rates were unprecedented, and the pharmaceutical company was increasing their offer. As I presented the latest data, I could feel my future solidifying. Speaking engagements, research grants, worldwide implementation. Afterward, Matteo found me in the lab. "Your mother's still here." "Of course she is." I adjusted my microscope. "Did she tell you how she took Ethan's side during the divorce? How she told me I was being childish and jealous?" "She mentioned it." He sat beside me. "She also showed me the foreclosure notice. It's bad, Michaela." "I know." I pushed away from the microscope. "But this treatment, it's not just about money. We're saving lives. And you can keep saving lives while helping your family, he said gently. The two aren't mutually exclusive. My phone buzzed. A text from Luna. They're freezing all his assets. Even my apartment, please talk to him. It's spreading, I muttered. Like a virus. Violet appeared with more news. Ethan's business partner just turned state's evidence. It's all over the financial news. I pulled up the article on my computer. The scope of Ethan's fraud was staggering. Hundreds of millions in investor money, all built on lies and false promises. Your name isn't mentioned anywhere, Violet noted. Small mercies, I closed the browser, but my family's will be soon enough. My mother appeared in the doorway again, looking smaller than ever. The FBI wants to interview me tomorrow. They're saying we might be held liable, that we should have known. I stood up, suddenly tired. Go home, Mom. I'll come by tonight. We'll talk about options. After she left, Violet touched my arm. You're not responsible for fixing this. No, I agreed, but I might be responsible for what happens next. My phone lit up with another text, this time from Josephine. Mom told me you'll help. Thank you. I know we don't deserve it. I didn't respond. Instead, I looked at the latest patient photos on my wall. People smiling, living, surviving because of our work. Whatever I decided, I couldn't let Ethan's lies taint that truth. Schedule a meeting with the lawyers, I told Violet. If we're going to do this, we're doing it my way. You want to do what? Matteo stared at me across the conference room table, his coffee forgotten. Set up a separate foundation, I repeated, spreading out the draft documents our lawyers had prepared. The pharmaceutical deal money goes into research and patient assistance. A portion gets allocated to help fraud victims, including my family, but not exclusively. Violet leaned forward. You're turning your revenge into a rescue mission? More like turning poison into medicine. I smiled grimly. Isn't that what we do anyway? Before anyone could respond, my assistant interrupted. Dr. Warner, Ethan's here. The room fell silent. I hadn't seen him in person since the divorce. Should we call security? Matteo asked, half rising. No, I stood up. I need to handle this. Ethan waited in my office, looking expensive even in distress. His suit was perfectly tailored, but his eyes were haunted. You look well, Michaela, he said softly. Success suits you. What do you want, Ethan? He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I once found endearing. I need your help, but not the way you think. The way I think is that you're facing federal charges and trying to drag my family down with you. It's more complicated than that. He pulled out his phone, showing me an email. There are people, powerful investors. They're willing to make this all go away if we can show them working technology. I laughed. And you want what? To pretend my treatment is part of your company's portfolio? Think about it, he leaned forward. Your research, my connections, we could help everyone. Your family, my investors, the patients. Stop. I held up my hand. Just stop. You haven't changed at all, have you? Still trying to use other people's work to cover your lies. I made mistakes, he admitted, but people will lose everything. Your mother, Josephine, even Luna. Don't. My voice sharpened. Don't pretend you care about them. You used them, just like you used me. A knock at the door revealed Violet. Everything okay in here? Fine. I didn't take my eyes off Ethan. He was just leaving. Michaela, please, his voice cracked. I know I hurt you, but this is bigger than us. You're right about that. I walked to my office door and opened it, which is why I'm handling it my way. After he left, I called an emergency meeting with my team and the lawyers. The conference room filled quickly, everyone sensing the importance. Here's what we're going to do, I announced, distributing folders. The foundation will operate independently from the pharmaceutical deal. Complete transparency, ethical oversight, no room for manipulation. What about your family? Matteo asked. They'll have to apply like anyone else affected by the fraud. No special treatment. The lawyers nodded approvingly. One spoke up. This protects you and your research while still providing aid. It's elegant. It's fair, I corrected. Something Ethan never understood. My phone buzzed. Josephine again. Just saw Ethan leaving your building. What did he want? I ignored it and focused on the meeting. We spent hours hammering out details, ensuring everything was airtight. By evening, we had a solid plan. You're doing the right thing, Violet said as we packed up, even if it's not the easy thing. Nothing about this has been easy. I gathered my papers, but I won't let Ethan turn my work into another one of his schemes. At home that night, I finally called Josephine back. Ethan tried to convince me to help him fake technology for his investors, I told her. Oh, God, she sounded sick. And I'm setting up a foundation instead. You'll get information about applying for assistance soon. Applying? Her voice rose. Michaela, we're family. Exactly. Which is why you'll understand that I have to do this right. After hanging up, I opened my laptop to find an email from Luna. Whatever Ethan told you today, please know some of us were victims too. I never knew. I closed the email without responding. My screen showed a news alert. FBI expands investigation into tech startup fraud. Multiple conspirators suspected. My phone rang. My mother this time. I heard about your foundation idea, she said quietly. It's good, Michaela. It's what you always were, someone who helps people. Even when those people hurt me, I asked. Especially then, she paused. I'm sorry we didn't see it sooner. I looked at the patient photos on my wall, then at the foundation documents on my desk. Mom, I need you to understand something. This isn't forgiveness. This is justice for everyone involved. I understand. Her voice was small. Thank you for not abandoning us completely. After we hung up, I texted Matteo. Meeting tomorrow at 8. Time to put this plan in motion. His response came quickly. You're doing something extraordinary here, don't forget that. I smiled, thinking how different this felt from revenge. This was something better, something healing. The foundation's launch event was set for Friday evening at the city's main hospital. I stood at the podium adjusting my notes when I spotted Ethan slipping into the back of the auditorium. He's got some nerve, Matteo muttered beside me. Let him stay, I said. He should see this. The room filled quickly. Medical professionals, investors, media, and victims of Ethan's fraud. My mother and Josephine sat in the middle, looking uncomfortable in their dated business attire. Luna hovered near the exit, her designer clothes a stark contrast to her anxious expression. Ready? Violet squeezed my arm. I nodded and stepped up to the microphone. Good evening. I'm Dr. Michaela Warner, and today we're announcing something unprecedented in medical research. As I outlined the Foundation's dual mission, advancing treatment accessibility while providing restitution to fraud victims, I watched Ethan's face. His expression shifted from hope to confusion to something like fear. Every dollar of fraud victims' money that went into false promises, I continued, will be matched by our foundation for real medical advancement. We're turning empty words into actual healing. The audience stirred. I saw my mother wipe her eyes. Applications for assistance open next week, I explained. Every claim will be evaluated fairly regardless of personal connections or past relationships. Ethan stood up, moving toward the podium. Security tensed, but I held up my hand. Dr. Warner, he called out, his voice carrying across the room. May I ask a question? The audience turned to stare at him. Some recognized him from the news coverage. Of course, I said calmly. Transparency is one of our core values. This foundation, he said, it's using the pharmaceutical company's payment for your treatment, isn't it? Money that could have gone to you personally? Yes, I met his gaze. Because unlike some people, I believe success comes with responsibility. A reporter raised her hand. Dr. Warner, is it true that the man asking questions is your ex-husband currently under federal investigation? Yes, I answered. And his question highlights exactly why this foundation is necessary. While some people built empires on lies, we're building something real on truth. Ethan's face reddened. Michaela, please. We need to talk privately. No, we don't. I gestured to the presentation screen behind me, showing patient recovery statistics. These numbers are what matter. Real results, real hope. He took another step forward. You're doing this to punish me. Actually, Violet stood up. She's doing this to help people, including those you hurt. Now please sit down or leave. The room buzzed with whispers. I saw phones recording everything. The Foundation's first initiative, I continued, ignoring Ethan, will fund treatment for 50 lymphoma patients who couldn't otherwise afford it. Their lives matter more than any revenge. Applause broke out. Ethan slumped in his seat, finally silent. After the presentation during the reception, my mother approached me. I saw the application forms, she said quietly. They're thorough. They have to be. I sipped my water. Everyone gets treated equally. Even family? Especially family. I watched Josephine across the room talking to one of the Foundation's lawyers. It's the only way this works. Luna appeared next, looking nervous. Can we talk? I led her to a quiet corner. She pulled out her phone, showing me emails. Ethan's been moving money, she said. Hidden accounts. He told me it was normal business practice, but after your speech tonight... You should take those to the FBI, I said gently. I already did. She straightened her shoulders. I'm done protecting him. Across the room, Ethan watched us, his face pale. When he started walking over, Matteo stepped between us. I think you've done enough damage, he told Ethan. This isn't over, Ethan hissed, but security was already approaching. As they escorted him out, I heard him call back. You'll regret this, Michaela. You can't play saint forever. Violet appeared at my side. You okay? Better than okay. I watched the doors close behind him. For the first time, I feel completely free. The evening wound down with more interviews, handshakes, and photographs. My team beamed with pride as reporters asked about our research breakthroughs. Finally, as the last guests left, Josephine lingered. I'll help, she said suddenly. With the Foundation. Processing applications, whatever you need, I want to make things right. I studied her face, seeing genuine remorse. There's a lot of work to do. I know, she smiled sadly. But you showed me what real success looks like. It's not what Ethan promised, it's what you built. As I drove home that night, my phone buzzed with messages of support and media requests. But one text from Matteo stood out. You didn't just beat him. You showed everyone a better way. That's the best revenge. I smiled, thinking of the patients who would benefit, the victims who would find justice, and the family that might finally learn from their mistakes. Tomorrow would bring more work, more challenges, more healing. But tonight, I had peace knowing I'd chosen the right path. Not the easiest one, but the one that would help the most people. The first round of Foundation applications is overwhelming, Josephine said, spreading papers across my office desk. Over 300 victims so far, and more coming in. I looked up from my microscope. 3 weeks had passed since the launch, and my sister had thrown herself into the Foundation work with surprising dedication. Any familiar names? I asked. Too many. She held up a stack. Half our extended family, most of Dad's golf club, even my kid's former piano teacher. Matteo knocked and entered with fresh coffee. The FBI's here again. They want to talk about the offshore accounts Luna revealed. Send them in. I stood, straightening my lab coat. Josephine, would you... Stay, she interrupted. I should tell them what I know too. 2 agents entered, the same ones who'd interviewed me last week. They looked grimmer than before. Dr. Warner, the female agent began, we've uncovered something disturbing. Your ex-husband wasn't just running a Ponzi scheme. He was selling medical research data. My stomach dropped. What kind of data? Early versions of your treatment research. She pulled out some documents. We found emails where he claimed to have proprietary medical breakthroughs. That's impossible, I breathed. That research never left the lab. Unless, Josephine said quietly, he took it during your marriage. The memory hit me. Ethan, always so interested in my work, asking questions, photographing my notes to understand my passion better. We'll need access to your original research files, the male agent said. To compare with what he sold? Of course, I turned to Matteo. Get them everything. After the agents left, Violet rushed in. You need to see the news. On my office TV, Ethan was being led out of his company building in handcuffs. The crawler beneath read, "Tech CEO arrested. Medical data theft added to charges." "He's really done it now," Josephine whispered. "Stealing medical research? That's federal prison time." My phone buzzed. Luna again. "They're questioning everyone. Your mother's at the FBI office now." "Go," Matteo told me. "We'll handle things here." At the FBI office, I found my mother in tears. "I didn't know," she kept saying. "He asked me to invest in medical technology. I thought he was supporting your work." "Mrs. Warner," the agent said gently, "did your son-in-law ever show you any research documents?" "Yes." She wiped her eyes. "He said they were breakthrough treatments, that Michaela was part of it all." I felt sick. "Mum, I never gave him permission to share my work." "I know that now." She reached for my hand. "I'm so sorry, honey. We were all so blind." Back at the lab, Violet had news. "The pharmaceutical company wants to make a statement supporting you. They're doubling their commitment to the foundation." "Good." I sat heavily in my chair. "Because we're going to need it, those stolen research files. Who knows how many people invested based on them?" Josephine, who'd followed me back, spoke up. "I have an idea. What if we expand the foundation's scope? Not just financial help, but a whole program to educate people about scientific integrity and investment fraud." I looked at my sister. Really looked at her. The entitled woman who'd dismissed my work was gone, replaced by someone who finally understood value beyond money. "Actually," I said, "that's brilliant." We worked late into the night, revising the foundation's mission. Matteo ordered dinner, and even my mother stayed, helping organize victim statements. Around midnight, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. "Your research saved my daughter's life. I invested in Ethan's company because I believed in that kind of miracle. I'm sorry it wasn't real, but thank you for making the real thing happen." I showed it to the others. "This is why we do this." "No," Violet corrected. "This is why you do this. You took something painful and made it healing." My mother touched my arm. "I keep thinking about all those board meetings at Ethan's company. The way he'd talk about medical breakthroughs, and I'd sit there feeling so proud. I never once asked why you weren't involved." "Because he was good at telling people what they wanted to hear," I said. "But now we're showing them what's real." Josephine looked up from her stack of applications. "Speaking of real, we should probably talk about my application. I know you said no special treatment, but nothing." I took the paper from her. "You'll go through the same process as everyone else. That's how we maintain integrity." She nodded, and I saw respect in her eyes, maybe for the first time. My phone buzzed again. The FBI. "Need you in court tomorrow, Ethan's arraignment." "I'll go with you," Matteo offered. "We all will," Violet added. I looked around my office, at my sister organizing papers, my mother finally understanding my work, my team standing by me. This wasn't the family I'd imagined having, but it was the one I'd built. "Tomorrow, then," I said. "We face him together." The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters when we arrived. Ethan's arrest had become national news, a cautionary tale of tech fraud meeting medical ethics. "Dr. Warner," they called out. "How does it feel knowing your ex-husband stole your research?" Before I could respond, Matteo stepped forward. "Dr. Warner will make a statement after the arraignment." Inside, the courtroom was packed. Luna sat in the front row, her designer clothes replaced by a simple black suit. She nodded slightly as we passed. "All rise," the bailiff called. Ethan entered in an orange jumpsuit, handcuffed, looking nothing like the confident man who'd once dismissed my work as just lab stuff. His eyes found mine, pleading. The charges were red: wire fraud, securities fraud, theft of intellectual property, conspiracy to commit fraud. The list went on. "How does the defendant plead?" the judge asked. Ethan's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client wishes to make a statement." "This should be good," Violet whispered beside me. "Your Honor," Ethan began, his voice shaking. "I admit I made mistakes, but everything I did was to create something meaningful. Dr. Warner's research. I only shared it because I believed in its potential. I felt my mother stiffen beside me. The defendant will enter a plea, the judge interrupted. Not guilty, Ethan said, then turned to face me. Michaela, please, tell them we were building something together. I stood up. Your Honor, may I speak? The judge nodded. Mr. Harding never had permission to use my research. While he was telling investors about medical breakthroughs, I was actually creating them, in my lab, with my team. He didn't believe in potential. He believed in profit. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Ethan's face reddened. Order, the judge called. Mr. Harding, given the severity of the charges and the flight risk, bail is denied. As they led Ethan away, Luna approached me. The FBI found more accounts. He was planning to flee to a non-extradition country. Of course he was, I said. He never faced consequences before. Outside, the media waited. This time, I was ready. Dr. Warner, a reporter called, what would you say to other scientists worried about their research being stolen? I'd say that truth prevails. I gestured to my team. Real breakthroughs happen in labs, not boardrooms. Real healing comes from dedication, not deception. And what about the foundation? Another asked. The foundation continues its work. Today we're announcing full funding for another 100 lymphoma patients, plus educational programs about scientific integrity. Josephine stepped forward. As someone who invested in the fraud, I can say the foundation isn't just about money. It's about rebuilding trust. Back at the lab, celebrations were in order. Our treatment had just received final FDA approval, and the first round of foundation grants was ready. Look at this, Violet said, showing me her tablet. Our story was trending. Medical breakthrough triumphs over tech fraud. The pharmaceutical company's stock is soaring, Matteo added. They're calling it the integrity bump. My mother appeared with coffee for everyone. She'd been volunteering at the foundation, learning about real medical research. I spoke to Dad, she said quietly. He's finally ready to talk. Seeing Ethan in court, it opened his eyes. Speaking of opening eyes, Josephine called from my computer, you need to see these application responses. She pulled up emails from fraud victims. Not angry demands for money, but thoughtful reflections on lessons learned. Many asked to join our educational programs. We're changing the narrative, I realized. It's not just about losing money anymore. It's about understanding value. Luna appeared in my doorway. The prosecutors want to meet tomorrow. They're offering a deal, but they need your input. No deals, I said firmly. He needs to face everything he did. Agreed. She handed me a flash drive. Here's everything I found in his private files. He kept detailed notes about how he used your research, called it his insurance policy. I took the drive, feeling its weight. Thank you for coming forward. Thank you for showing me what integrity looks like, she replied. That evening, as my team celebrated our FDA approval, I watched them all. Matteo arranging patient schedules, Violet explaining the treatment to new doctors, Josephine helping fraud victims understand the application process, my mother learning the difference between real research and empty promises. My phone buzzed with a message from Ethan's lawyer. He wants to make a deal. Says he'll reveal everything about the fraud if you support leniency. I showed it to Violet, who scoffed, still trying to manipulate his way out. Not this time, I said, deleting the message. The lab's TV showed Ethan's company building being raided by federal agents. But across the street, our foundation's new educational center was opening its doors. Dr. Warner, my assistant appeared. The first round of funded patients is here for treatment. I stood, straightening my lab coat. This was real success, not revenge, not vindication, but actual healing. As I headed to meet the patients, I caught my reflection in the window. I barely recognized the woman who'd once doubted her worth in Ethan's shadow. She was gone, replaced by someone who knew exactly who she was and what she could do. The morning of Ethan's sentencing, I stood at my lab window watching the sunrise paint the city gold. My phone buzzed with a text from Matteo. Court in an hour, ready? Before I could respond, Josephine rushed in. You need to see this. She handed me her tablet, showing an email from Ethan. He'd sent it to everyone he'd ever contacted about his fraudulent company. Today, I face sentencing for my crimes. But first, I owe you all the truth. The medical breakthroughs I promised weren't mine to promise. They belonged to my ex-wife, Dr. Michaela Warner. While I sold lies, she created genuine healing. The foundation she built from the ashes of my fraud represents everything I pretended to be but never was. He actually admitted it, I whispered. There's more, Josephine said. Look at the responses. Hundreds of replies flooded in, from investors, victims, even former employees. Not angry accusations, but messages of support for the foundation's work. Violet appeared with coffee. The pharmaceutical company saw the email. They're tripling their funding commitment. And the patient waiting list? I asked. We can help them all now, she smiled. Every single one. In the courthouse, Ethan stood before the judge in his orange jumpsuit, shoulders slumped. Before sentencing, the judge said, Dr. Warner has requested to speak. I walked to the podium, feeling everyone's eyes. Your Honor, when my ex-husband stole my research, he didn't just commit fraud. He betrayed the trust of people hoping for healing. But something unexpected happened. His crimes led to the creation of a foundation that's now helping more people than his false promises ever could. I turned to face Ethan directly. You taught me something important, I continued. Success isn't about winning or revenge. It's about turning damage into healing. The judge nodded. Mr. Harding, you've pled guilty to all charges. Given the scope of your fraud and the theft of medical research, I sentence you to 15 years in federal prison. As they led him away, Ethan caught my eye. I'm sorry, he mouthed. Outside, my mother waited with news. Dad's here. He wants to help with the Foundation's education program. Says he can teach others about the warning signs he missed. Before I could respond, Luna approached. The FBI finished tracking the money. With what they've recovered, plus the pharmaceutical funding, the Foundation can expand globally. Speaking of global, Matteo said, checking his phone, the World Health Organization wants you to speak about medical ethics and fraud prevention. I looked at my assembled family, not just blood relatives, but the people who'd stood by me through everything. Violet organizing patient care, Matteo protecting our research, Josephine rebuilding trust, my parents finally understanding real value. Dr. Warner? A young woman approached, holding a little girl's hand. My daughter was in your first treatment group. I wanted you to see. The girl smiled, healthy and bright. I'm going back to school next week. This, I told my team, this is what real success looks like. Back at the lab, we gathered for an impromptu celebration. The TV showed coverage of Ethan's sentencing, but nobody watched. We were too busy reviewing patient progress reports. Remember when he said your work was just lab stuff? Violet asked, pouring champagne. Now it's saving lives, Matteo added. My phone buzzed. A message from the pharmaceutical company. Treatment approval in 27 new countries. Foundation offices opening next month. Josephine looked up from her stack of applications. You know what's amazing? People aren't just asking for help anymore. They're asking how they can contribute. Because you showed them how, my mother said. You turned your pain into purpose. We all did, I corrected her. Every person in this room chose truth over lies, healing over hurt. The lab door opened, and my father walked in for the first time. He stood awkwardly, taking in the research displays, the patient photos, the Foundation's mission statement on the wall. I was wrong, he said simply, about everything. Show me how I can help make it right. I handed him a Foundation volunteer badge. Welcome to the team. As evening fell, I walked through the lab one last time before heading home. The microscopes that once represented lonely nights now showed breakthrough discoveries. The office where I'd received divorce papers now housed healing plans for thousands. My phone lit up with a final message from Ethan's prison email. You did what I never could. You built something real. I hope someday you can forgive me. I didn't respond. Instead, I texted my team. Tomorrow we start helping patients in 3 new countries. Better get some rest. Looking out at the city lights, I smiled. This wasn't the ending I'd expected when my marriage collapsed, when my family chose sides, when my work was stolen. It was better. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting better, building bigger, healing harder. And sometimes the family you rebuild is stronger than the one you lost. I turned off my office light and headed out, ready for tomorrow's challenges. After all, real success stories don't end, they just keep growing. The sound of my father's raised voice stopped me cold outside his office door. In all my 19 years, I'd never heard him yell like that. Not even when I totaled his car last summer. You had no right, Veronica. No right at all. I pressed myself against the wall, heart hammering. The scholarship letter in my back pocket suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I'm protecting this family, Veronica shot back, her voice dripping with that fake concern she'd perfected over the years. Have you seen the cost of that program? It'll bankrupt us, Michael. And for what? So she can run off to chase some ridiculous dream. I'm Hazel, and this was the moment I realized my stepmother had been sabotaging my life for years. She earned that scholarship on her own merit, Dad said, his voice cracking. And you went behind our backs to try and get it revoked? Merit! Veronica laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Please, we both know she only got it because of that sob story about her dead mother. My fingers curled into fists. The acceptance letter crinkled. Don't you dare, Dad warned. Don't you dare bring Sarah into this. Why not? Everyone else does. Poor little Hazel lost her mother so young. It's all I ever hear about. But who's been here? Who's been raising her? Me. And this is how she repays me? By running off to that fancy art school across the country? I bit my lip until I tasted blood. 6 years of forced smiles, of yes, Veronica, and whatever you think is best, Veronica. 6 years of watching her slowly isolate my father, turn him against my dreams, piece by piece. The scholarship stays, Dad said firmly. And if I find out you've tried to interfere again? You'll what? Veronica's voice turned deadly quiet. Leave me. Go ahead. But remember who helped you rebuild your business after the recession. Remember whose connections saved this family from bankruptcy. You really want to throw all that away for her art school fantasy? The silence that followed felt like a knife in my chest. That's what I thought, Veronica continued. Now I have a lovely dinner planned. We'll discuss this like a proper family. I'm sure Hazel will understand once we explain the financial reality. My phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn. Did you tell them about the scholarship yet? I typed back with shaking fingers. No, but V found out somehow. It's bad. Want me to come over? Before I could reply, footsteps approached the door. I scrambled back, nearly tripping over my own feet. Veronica emerged, perfectly composed as always. Her eyes widened in fake surprise. Hazel, darling, how long have you been home? Her smile never reached her eyes. It never did. Just got here, I lied, matching her fake warmth with my own. Is everything okay? I thought I heard voices. Oh, your father and I were just discussing your future. She reached out to touch my cheek. I forced myself not to flinch. Why don't you join us for dinner? We have so much to talk about. Behind her, I caught a glimpse of my father through the doorway. He sat at his desk, head in his hands, defeated. In that moment, something inside me hardened. 6 years of playing nice, of trying to keep the peace, of watching this woman slowly poison everything I loved. Actually, I said, stepping back from her reach, I have plans with Evelyn. School project, can't miss it. Family comes first, dear. Her fingers twitched just slightly. Cancel your plans. I met her gaze steadily. No, I said. I don't think I will. Something dark flashed across her face, just for a second, but I saw it. And I knew then that the war she'd been waging in secret was about to become very, very public. I turned and walked away, my mind already racing with plans. If Veronica wanted to play games, fine. But she was about to learn that some people play to win. Evelyn's basement had always been our sanctuary, but tonight it felt like a war room. I paced between the worn leather couch and the pool table, replaying the afternoon's confrontation while she watched me with growing concern. She actually tried to get your scholarship revoked. Evelyn's voice cracked with disbelief. That's next-level psycho, even for Veronica. I stopped pacing, fishing the crumpled acceptance letter from my pocket. Dad's signature is forged on this withdrawal request. Look at the date. 3 days ago. She must have gone through my room while I was at work. What are you going to do? The question hung in the air like smoke. Through the basement window, I caught glimpses of people walking past. Normal families heading home for normal dinners without wondering if their stepmother was plotting their downfall. Remember when she first moved in? I sank onto the couch. How she used to bring me those little art supplies. Watercolours, sketch pads, fancy pencils. Yeah, you were what? 13? 12! My laugh came out bitter. God, I actually thought she cared about my art. Turns out she was just marking her territory, making sure Dad saw her playing mommy. My phone buzzed. Dad again. 4th missed call. You should talk to him, Evelyn said softly. And say what? Hey, Dad. Sorry your wife's a manipulative snake who's been sabotaging me since middle school. Maybe he needs to hear exactly that. Before I could respond, footsteps thundered down the basement stairs. Derek burst in, still wearing his work uniform from the garage. You okay? Got your text? He crossed to the couch, pulling me close. The familiar smell of motor oil and cologne steadied my nerves. I'm fine, just family drama. Bullshit. He pulled back, studying my face. You're shaking. Evelyn tossed him the forged withdrawal letter. His expression darkened as he read. This is illegal, he said finally. We should report her. To who? The evil stepmother police. The actual police. This is fraud. My phone buzzed again. This time a text from Veronica. Your father is very disappointed in your behaviour. Come home so we can discuss this as a family. I showed them the message. Evelyn swore under her breath. Classic manipulation, she said, making it sound like your dad's the one who's upset when she's the one pulling strings. You can stay at my place, Derek offered. My roommate's gone for the week. The offer was tempting, but running would only prove Veronica right, that I was too immature, too unstable for the scholarship program. My phone chimed again. This time it was Sophie, Veronica's best friend. Hey, sweetie, heard about the scholarship situation. Let's grab coffee tomorrow, just us girls. That's weird, Evelyn said, reading over my shoulder. Since when does Sophie reach out to you directly? Since never. I forwarded the text to them both. Think Veronica put her up to it? Obviously, Derek scoffed. But maybe we can use that. Evelyn sat up straighter. What do you mean? Sophie knows all Veronica's secrets, right? And lately, I've noticed tension between them at the country club. I turned to face him. What kind of tension? The kind where Sophie drinks too much at ladies' brunch and starts venting about feeling used. Trust me, there's bad blood there. A plan started forming in my mind. So if someone were to encourage that tension... Exactly. Derek squeezed my hand. Fight fire with fire. It's risky, Evelyn warned. If Veronica figures out you're turning her friends against her, what's she gonna do? I stood up, suddenly energized. Try to ruin my life? Too late. My phone buzzed one final time. Dad, please come home, kiddo, we need to talk. I stared at the message, remembering his defeated posture in the office. How long had Veronica been manipulating him? How many other times had she sabotaged things behind our backs? I'm going home, I announced, but not to make peace. Want backup? Derek asked. I shook my head. I need to handle this part alone, but tomorrow. I looked at my friends, feeling a surge of gratitude for their loyalty. Tomorrow we start planning. Planning what? Evelyn asked. I thought about all the little cruelties, all the subtle manipulations over the years. How Veronica had slowly poisoned everything good in our family while maintaining her perfect stepmother facade. Planning how to make her mask slip, I said, in front of everyone. Sophie's coffee shop suggestion turned out to be the most expensive place in town. Of course it was. I watched her stir her third sugar packet into her latte, wondering how many of Veronica's secrets that perfectly glossed smile was hiding. "I've known your stepmother for 15 years, Sophie said, tapping her spoon against the rim. "She means well, even if her methods are unconventional." Unconventional? The word tasted like acid. "Is that what we're calling fraud now?" Sophie's smile flickered. "The scholarship withdrawal was extreme, I'll admit. But she's just trying to protect you from what? Success? Independence?" A group of women at the next table glanced over. Sophie lowered her voice. "From making the same mistakes she did. Did you know she went to art school too?" That stopped me cold. "What?" "Before she met your father. She was quite talented." Sophie's perfectly manicured nails drummed against her cup. "Then her first husband died, leaving her with nothing but student debt and unfinished paintings." My phone buzzed. "Derek, found something interesting in V's old social media. Call me." "What happened to her art?" I asked, buying time. "Life happened. Bills. Reality." Sophie leaned forward. "She doesn't want you struggling like she did. So instead of warning me, she forges documents and tries to sabotage my future." "You don't understand how much she—" "You're right," I cut her off. "I don't understand. Just like I don't understand why you're really here." Something shifted in Sophie's expression, a crack in her polished veneer. "What do you mean?" "Veronica sent you to do damage control, but you're not telling me everything." She sat back, studying me with new interest. "You're sharper than she gives you credit for, and you're not as loyal as she thinks you are." The words hung between us like smoke. Sophie's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her purse. "Be careful, Hazel," she said quietly. "Veronica doesn't handle betrayal well. Ask her sister." "She doesn't have a sister." Sophie stood, dropping cash on the table. "Exactly." My phone buzzed again as she walked away. This time it was Evelyn. "Emergency. V's at the school board meeting right now." Ice shot through my veins. The scholarship committee meeting, the one where they finalized fall admissions. I ran out of the coffee shop, dialing Derek. He answered on the first ring. "Found her old wedding announcement," he said without preamble. "Before your dad. Get this, her first husband didn't die. He left her after she—" "Tell me later." I cut him off, already sprinting toward my car. "She's at the school board. We need everything you found, now." "On it. Meet you there." The drive to the administration building was a blur. I found Evelyn pacing outside, clutching a manila folder. "She's telling them you cheated on your portfolio submission," she said, shoving the folder at me. "But I got copies of all your original work submissions from Mrs. Chen. Every dated draft, every progress photo." My hands shook as I flipped through the evidence. 6 years of work. 6 years of dreams she was trying to destroy. "How long has she been in there?" 20 minutes. They're in the main conference room." I started toward the door, but Evelyn caught my arm. "Wait," she said. "There's more. Sophie called me right after you met. Said to check Veronica's history with the Sterling Art Institute. That's where she went to school. Where she taught. Until she was fired for selling student work as her own. The pieces clicked together like a terrible puzzle. Her obsession with my art supplies. The way she'd hover when I worked. All those suggestions about signing my pieces differently. She wasn't preparing to be a supportive stepmother, I whispered. She was marking her territory, making sure everyone knew she was the real artist in the family. "Hazel," Evelyn's voice was urgent, "if she convinces them you cheated." "She won't." I pushed through the building's doors, clutching my evidence folder like a shield. Behind me, I heard Derek's car screech into the parking lot. Ahead, voices drifted from the conference room, including Veronica's, smooth as honey, and twice as toxic. I hate to bring this to your attention, but as someone who deeply values artistic integrity, I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders. Time to show her what real artistic integrity looked like. "Ready?" Evelyn whispered beside me. I thought of Sophie's warning about betrayal, about Veronica's mysterious sister, about all the lives she'd poisoned before mine. "Ready," I said, and pushed open the conference room door. The Sterling Art Institute's records arrived in a plain manila envelope, but the contents hit like a bomb. I spread the documents across Derek's kitchen table while Evelyn paced behind me. Terminated for ethical violations, I read aloud. Multiple incidents of unauthorized use of student work. Keep reading, Derek said, pointing to the next paragraph. Following investigation, Professor Veronica Mitchell agreed to resign quietly in exchange for... My voice caught. In exchange for destroying all evidence of student complaints. Evelyn stopped pacing. She didn't just steal their work, she erased their voices. My phone lit up with Dad's message. Coming home tonight. We need to talk about what happened at the school board. The school board meeting had been a disaster. Not because I'd failed to defend myself, but because Veronica had turned it into exactly what she wanted. A public spectacle of concern for her troubled stepdaughter. I should have seen it coming, I said, shuffling through more documents. The way she cried in front of the committee, talking about how worried she was about my unstable behavior and concerning patterns. She's good, Derek admitted. Making herself look like the victim while destroying you? That's next-level manipulation. Another document caught my eye. A newspaper clipping from 15 years ago. Local artist wins regional prize. The photo showed a younger Veronica beside a hauntingly familiar painting. That's your style, Evelyn whispered. The way you layer colours, the composition. No, I corrected her, hands shaking. That's my mother's style. The room went silent. I pulled up a photo on my phone, one of my mum's last paintings before she died. The similarities were undeniable. She didn't just want to stop me from going to art school, I said slowly. She wanted to erase every trace of my mother's influence. That's why she pushed me toward different techniques all these years. Derek's phone buzzed. Sophie wants to meet, says she has something we need to see. It's a trap, Evelyn warned. Maybe, I said, still staring at the painting. But we need more proof. You have proof, Evelyn gestured at the documents. Take this to your dad. Show him what she really is. I thought about Dad's message, about the way he looked at Veronica even now, like she was his salvation after Mom died. The truth would destroy him. There's something else, Derek said quietly. Something Sophie mentioned about Veronica's sister. The one who supposedly doesn't exist. He pulled up an old social media post. Meet Christina Mitchell, Veronica's younger sister, also an artist. The photo showed two women, arms linked, smiling at a gallery opening. The caption read, Sisters sharing their passion for art. What happened to her? Evelyn asked. That's the thing, Derek scrolled through more posts. She just disappears. No death notice, no explanation. Just gone, right after Veronica started teaching at Sterling. My phone buzzed again. Veronica this time. Your father's very disappointed. But we can fix this if you're willing to be honest about your issues. The pieces clicked together like a terrible puzzle. Christina's disappearance, the stolen artwork, the systematic destruction of anyone who threatened Veronica's artistic identity. She's not going to stop, I realized. The school board was just the beginning. She'll keep going until she's destroyed everything I am. So what do we do? Evelyn asked. I looked at the documents spread across the table, at my mother's artistic legacy that Veronica had tried to erase, at the evidence of lives she'd ruined before mine. We find Christina, I said, and we make Veronica face every person she's ever silenced. That's dangerous, Derek warned. If she did something to her own sister, then I need to know what I'm really dealing with. I started gathering the documents, because this isn't just about my future anymore. It's about making sure she never does this to anyone else. My phone lit up one last time. Sophie, meeting tonight. Come alone. There's something you need to know about Christina. I showed them the message. Don't go, they said in unison. But we all knew I would. Because sometimes the only way to fight a monster is to walk straight into their lair. I just hoped I was ready for whatever truth waited there. Sophie's hands trembled as she slid the envelope across the diner table. Outside, rain pelted the windows, turning the parking lot lights into blurry halos. The late-night crowd had thinned to a few truckers and an elderly couple sharing pie. "Christina's alive," Sophie said quietly, "but Veronica made sure she'll never paint again." I stared at the envelope, afraid to touch it. What did she do? It's not what she did. It's what she threatened to do. Sophie glanced over her shoulder. Christina had evidence, proof that Veronica had been stealing student work for years, but she also had a young daughter. My phone buzzed. "Derek, V just left your house, heading your way, get out now." I ignored it. Where is Christina now? Working at a hardware store in Oregon? Living under her married name? Sophie's mascara was smudged beneath her eyes. She gave up everything, her art, her identity, her whole life, to protect her daughter from Veronica's revenge. The envelope felt heavy as I picked it up. Inside were photos, Christina's gallery openings, her reviews in art magazines, her rising star suddenly snuffed out. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because Veronica's doing it again. She's already contacted the dean at your art school, planted seeds about your instability. She's building a case just like she did with Christina." My phone lit up again. Evelyn this time. "Your dad found the Sterling documents. He's furious. Call him." "What exactly did she do to Christina's daughter?" I asked. Sophie's voice dropped to a whisper. She arranged accidents, small ones at first, a fall at school, food poisoning, a bike crash. Nothing fatal, just enough to send a message. The elderly couple paid their bill and left. Rain drummed harder against the windows. "And now she's targeting me." "No," Sophie leaned forward. "She's targeting everyone you love. Derek's garage. The health inspection wasn't random. Your friend Evelyn's college recommendation being rescinded. Not a clerical error." My hands clenched into fists. "Why are you telling me this? You're her friend." "I was Christina's friend first." Sophie's eyes hardened. "And I've spent 15 years watching Veronica destroy people. It has to stop." The diner's bell chimed. Through the rain-streaked windows, I saw a familiar car pull into the lot. "She's here," Sophie whispered. "Remember what I said about Christina. There are worse things than giving up your dreams." I stood, shoving the envelope into my bag. "I'm not Christina." "No." Sophie's smile was sad. "You're worse. You're Sarah's daughter. And that's why she'll never stop until she's erased every trace of your mother's talent from your work." The diner's door opened. I heard the click of expensive heels on linoleum. "Hazel, darling." Veronica's voice dripped honey. "What a surprise running into you here." I turned slowly. She stood there in her perfect clothes, perfect makeup, perfect smile. But now I saw the cracks, the slight tremor in her hand, the tightness around her eyes. "Sophie and I were just discussing art," I said, "specifically the Sterling Art Institute's faculty records." The smile flickered. "Oh? How fascinating. Sophie, I didn't realize you and my stepdaughter had become so close." "We were actually talking about Christina," I pressed. "Your sister? The one who disappeared?" Veronica's mask slipped for just a second, long enough to see something dark and hungry beneath. "Sophie, dear, I think it's time you headed home." Sophie stood, gathering her purse. As she passed me, she whispered, "Choose carefully. Some victories cost more than defeat." I watched her hurry out into the rain, leaving me alone with the monster who'd married my father. "Shall we discuss this at home?" Veronica gestured to the door. "Your father's quite concerned about your recent behavior." I thought about Christina, living in exile to protect her child, about my mother's artistic legacy, slowly being erased, about Derek's garage and Evelyn's future. "No," I said quietly. "I think we should discuss it right here. All of it. Unless you'd prefer the police handle the investigation into Christina's disappearance." Veronica's smile turned razor-sharp. "Oh, sweetheart, you really are your mother's daughter." She slid into the booth across from me. "Let's talk about what happens to people who threaten my family." Outside, the rain kept falling, washing away any chance of escape. The police station's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across Dad's face as he stared at the photos spread before him. Christina's evidence, the Sterling Institute documents, everything I'd gathered to expose Veronica. "She says you've been stalking her sister," he said quietly, "that you've become obsessed. Dad, the restraining order is temporary." His voice cracked. "But Hazel, they found those threatening emails on your laptop." My blood ran cold. "What emails?" "To Christina, to Sophie." He pushed a printout across the table. "To Veronica's old students, all sent from your account." The words blurred before my eyes. Emails I'd never written, threatening violence against everyone who'd wronged me, all perfectly crafted to make me sound unhinged. "She planted them," I whispered. "She must have accessed my computer when—" "Stop." Dad pressed his hands against his temples. "Just stop. The doctors think—" "Doctors?" The interview room door opened. Veronica glided in, followed by a man in a white coat. Her eyes were red-rimmed, perfectly portraying the concerned stepmother. "Dr. Reynolds specializes in acute psychiatric episodes," she said softly. "He's agreed to help us understand what's happening." The doctor sat down, opening a file. "Your father and stepmother have described some concerning behaviors, Hazel. Paranoid delusions, conspiracy theories, escalating aggression." "This isn't real," I laughed, the sound sharp and desperate. "Dad, you can't believe—" "We found your mother's paintings," Veronica interrupted. "The ones you've been copying, claiming they're your original work, adding dates to make it look like I stole from you when really—" My phone buzzed in my pocket. Derek. But before I could reach for it, Veronica continued. "And poor Sophie. Having to file a restraining order against you after you threatened her daughter." "What?" I turned to Dad. "That's not—" "The emails were quite graphic," the doctor said, "describing how you'd make her pay for betraying you." Another buzz. Evelyn this time. But the officer by the door stepped closer, watching my movements. "We just want to help." Veronica reached for my hand. I jerked away. "A short stay at the treatment center, some medication to stabilize your mood." "Dad," I pleaded, "look at me. You know me." He wouldn't meet my eyes. I thought I did. My phone buzzed a third time. The officer frowned. "Phone, please," he said. "Protocol for psychiatric holds." The world tilted sideways. This was her endgame. Not just destroying my future, but my credibility, my sanity, everything I could use against her. "Christina," I said desperately. "Call Christina, she'll tell you." "Your obsession with my sister has to stop." Veronica's voice hardened. "She's dead, Hazel. She died 15 years ago. I showed you the death certificate, but she hadn't. That was the mistake. The single thread that could unravel everything." "No," I said slowly. "You didn't." Something flickered in her eyes. Fear. My phone buzzed one final time. A text preview lit up the screen before the officer could grab it. "Found Christina. She's alive. Video proof. Holding for—" The phone went dark in the officer's hand. But I'd seen enough. Veronica had too, judging by the way her perfectly manicured nails dug into her palms. "I think," the doctor said, "given the severity of the delusions, immediate intervention would be best." 2 orderlies appeared in the doorway. Dad stood, finally looking at me with tears in his eyes. "It's just for a few days," he said, "until you're thinking clearly again." I looked at Veronica, at her mask of concern hiding the triumph beneath. She'd orchestrated everything perfectly. The evidence against her would be dismissed as the ravings of a mentally ill teenager. My father would sign whatever papers she put in front of him, and I'd disappear into a system designed to make people doubt their own reality. Just like Christina had disappeared, just like all the others who'd threatened Veronica's carefully constructed world. The orderlies stepped forward with a wheelchair. "Standard protocol," they said, "for my own safety." But as they reached for me, I remembered Sophie's words. Some victories cost more than defeat. I had to choose, fight now and prove Veronica right about my instability, or submit and pray Derek's message meant what I thought it did. Okay, I whispered, sinking into the wheelchair. You win. Veronica's smile was radiant with false compassion. But she didn't see me slip the police interview room recording device into my sock, the one that had captured every word of her careful manipulation. Sometimes surrender is just another way to fight. The treatment center's visiting rooms smelled like artificial lemons and despair. 3 days of observation had taught me the camera's blind spots, the staff's rotation schedule, and exactly how long I had before someone noticed the recording device missing from my sock. Christina sat across from me, her hands trembling around her paper coffee cup. She looked nothing like the vibrant artist in those old photos. Her hair was grey now, her eyes haunted. I shouldn't be here, she whispered. If Veronica finds out, she already knows. I slid my phone across the table, showing her the security footage Derek had captured. You've been watching me for weeks, haven't you? Ever since Sophie reached out? She nodded, tears welling. I had to make sure you weren't like her, that helping you wouldn't put my daughter at risk again. The door opened. Veronica swept in, perfectly coiffed even at this early hour. Her smile froze when she saw Christina. Well, she said softly, the prodigal sister returns. Hello, Veronica. Here to fuel more of Hazel's delusions? Veronica sat beside me, maternal concern radiating from every pore. The doctors say she's been making excellent progress. We wouldn't want to trigger another episode. I pressed play on the hidden recorder. Veronica's own voice filled the room. Your obsession with my sister has to stop. She's dead, Hazel. She died 15 years ago. Christina's hands stopped shaking. I'm very much alive, sister dear. And I brought proof of everything you did, every painting you stole, every student you threatened, every accident that befell my daughter until I agreed to disappear. Careful, Veronica's voice turned silky. False accusations can be so damaging to one's credibility. Just ask Hazel about her recent psychiatric evaluation. That's why I'm not the one making the accusations. The door opened again. Dad walked in, followed by Detective Martinez and Sophie. My father's face was ashen as he held up a USB drive. The emails, he said. The ones you claimed Hazel sent. The IP address traces back to our home computer, during hours when Hazel was documented at work. Michael, don't, his voice cracked. Just don't. Detective Martinez stepped forward. We have a warrant to search your devices, Mrs. Mitchell, and statements from multiple former Sterling Institute students. Veronica's mask cracked, just for a second. Then she laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You ungrateful little snake, she hissed at me. I gave you everything, a mother's love, guidance, protection. You gave me chains, I said quietly, just like you gave Christina, like you gave all of them. I made them better artists. You stole their work, Christina's voice hardened, their dreams, their futures. I improved them, added my expertise, my vision. Added, Dad interrupted, or stole, like you stole my daughter's college fund. The money I thought was going to her tuition. Veronica stood backing toward the door, but Sophie blocked her path. It's over, Sophie said. No more manipulation, no more threats. You're all conspiring against me. Veronica's perfectly manicured hands clawed at her throat. I won't let you destroy everything I've built. I won't. She lunged for my phone, probably hoping to destroy the evidence, but her designer heel caught on the industrial carpet. She stumbled, catching herself against the wall, right beside my latest painting, the one I'd done in my mother's style, the one the doctors had allowed as art therapy. Veronica stared at it, something breaking in her expression. You'll never be her, she whispered. You'll never be Sarah. No matter how perfectly you copy her technique. I'm not trying to be her, I said. I'm being myself. That's what terrifies you, isn't it? That I might succeed where you failed? The detective stepped forward with handcuffs. Veronica didn't resist, her eyes fixed on the painting. You think this is victory? She asked softly. You think exposing me will heal what's broken inside you? No, I stood gathering my evidence. But it will stop you from breaking anyone else. As they led her away, I caught Christina's eye. She nodded once, understanding passing between us. Some victories don't feel like winning. Some battles leave scars even after justice is served. But watching Veronica's perfect facade finally shatter completely, that felt like freedom. Dad wrapped his arm around my shoulders as we walked out, leaving the artificial lemon smell and the ghost of Veronica's control behind us. Sometimes the greatest act of revenge is simply refusing to become what your monster wanted you to be. The gallery lights cast soft shadows across my mother's paintings. The real ones this time, rescued from Veronica's storage unit, along with dozens of other stolen works. Christina stood beside me, both of us reflected in the glass protecting Summer Storm, Mum's last completed piece. She never could capture light quite like Sarah did, Christina said quietly. That's what drove her mad, you know. Not just the stealing, but the knowing that she'd never be as genuine as the artists she destroyed. The exhibition, Reclaimed Voices, the Sterling Institute Recovery Project, had drawn hundreds. Former students, art critics, collectors, all here to reclaim what Veronica had stolen, to restore names to unsigned works, to heal old wounds. Dad appeared beside us, his tie slightly crooked. The detective wants to know if you'll testify at the sentencing hearing. I watched a young artist across the room discover her lost portfolio, tears streaming down her face as she traced her signature under Veronica's painted-over name. No, let the others tell their stories. I have something different in mind. Sophie approached, carrying a newspaper. The headline read, "Former art professor pleads guilty to fraud, theft of student works." "She's asking to see you," Sophie said, "claims she has something to say before they transfer her." She always has something to say. I turned away from Mum's painting. But I have work to do. That work waited in my studio. Not the basement room where Veronica had tried to shape me in her image, but a sun-filled space overlooking the city. My easel held a half-finished piece, nothing like Mum's style or Veronica's stolen techniques. Something entirely new. Derek found me there later, as sunset painted the windows gold. The exhibition's a success. They're already talking about touring it nationally. Good. I added another layer of paint, watching the colours blend. They deserve to have their work seen, their real work, under their real names. "And what about your work?" He gestured to the canvas. "This is different from anything you've done before." "Because it's finally mine." I stepped back, studying the emerging image. Not what Mum would have painted, not what Veronica tried to force me to be, just me. Evelyn burst in, waving her phone. "You need to see this now." The screen showed security footage from the county jail. Veronica sat in her cell, methodically tearing pages from a sketchbook. Each sheet contained perfect copies of other artists' works, as if she couldn't create anything else even now. "She's still doing it," Evelyn whispered, "still trying to steal other people's light." "No," I set down my brush. "She's showing us who she always was. A reflection without a source, a mirror with nothing of her own to show." Dad called that evening, his voice tired but clear. "The divorce papers are filed, and I found something you should see." In his study, he opened Mum's old journal. A letter fell out, dated just before she died. "To my daughter, the artist who will paint her own sky." My hands shook as I read her words. "Don't let anyone tell you which colours to use or which stories to tell. Your art, like your heart, belongs only to you." I thought of Veronica in her cell, endlessly copying others' work. Of Christina, finally free to paint again. Of all the artists reclaiming their stolen voices. "I'm not going to testify," I told Dad, "but I am going to paint her portrait. One last piece showing exactly who she is." "Are you sure that's wise?" I looked at my latest work, at the unique style emerging from the canvas. She tried to make me choose between being Mom and being her. But there was always a third option, being myself. The portrait would show Veronica surrounded by mirrors, each reflecting someone else's art, her own face blank and empty at the centre. A warning, perhaps, or maybe just the truth she never could face. Sometimes Christina had said at the gallery. The best revenge is simply creating something your monster could never copy. I picked up my brush again as night fell, ready to paint my own sky. Behind me, Mom's journal lay open to her final words. The greatest masterpiece you'll ever create is the artist you become. Veronica had tried to steal that future, but in the end, she'd only helped me find it. The call came on what should have been my happiest day of the year, my 10th wedding anniversary. I was arranging roses in our dining room, humming to myself, when my phone lit up with a number I hadn't seen in a decade. My mother's number. My name is Brinley, and the last time I saw my parents was the day I told them I was marrying Javier. I still remember my mother's face turning to stone, my father's thunderous silence. "You'll destroy everything we've built," they said. "This isn't what we raised you for." "Brinley," my mother's voice crackled through the speaker, sounding older, frailer than I remembered. "Please don't hang up." I gripped the phone tighter, my other hand frozen mid-arrangement. "How did you get this number?" "Sadie, your sister." She thought it was time. Of course. Sadie, my younger sister, the eternal peacemaker. She'd kept in touch over the years, secretly meeting me for coffee, sending photos of her kids, always careful to keep it from our parents. "What do you want, Mum?" The words came out sharper than intended, but 10 years of silence does that to a person. "We need to meet. Your father and I. We need to talk to you about something important." I laughed, but there was no humour in it. Important? Like my wedding wasn't important enough for you to attend? "Brinley, please." Her voice cracked. "Things are different now. We're in trouble." The doorbell rang and I heard Javier's voice calling from the hallway. "Mi amor, the caterers are here." "Mum, I have to go. We're having an anniversary party tonight." 10 years, she whispered. "Has it been that long?" "Yes, 10 years since you and Dad chose your precious reputation over your daughter." We were wrong. The words hung in the air, stunning me into silence. "Please, meet us tomorrow. The Carter family store? It's failing. We need your help." I nearly dropped the phone. The store, my family's pride and joy for 3 generations. The reason my parents couldn't accept Javier, a newcomer without the right pedigree to join their legacy. "Brinley?" Javier appeared in the doorway, his dark eyes concerned. "Everything okay?" I held up a finger, turning back to the phone. "Tomorrow, noon. But not at the store. Meet me at Riverside Cafe." "Thank you," my mother breathed. "We'll be there." I ended the call just as Javier wrapped his arms around me. Was that my mother? I leaned back against his chest, letting his warmth steady me. The family business is failing, and suddenly they need our help. "Our help?" He raised an eyebrow. "The same help they rejected when I offered to modernize their operations before the wedding?" "Karma's a funny thing, isn't it?" I turned to face him. "The successful consulting firm you built, the one they said would never work, might be their only hope." "What are you thinking?" He knew that look in my eyes. "I'm thinking it's time they faced their mistakes, publicly." I smiled, but it wasn't entirely kind. They wanted to hide me away, pretend their daughter hadn't married outside their precious social circle. Now they'll have to acknowledge us, accept us if they want our help. "Careful, mi amor." Javier touched my cheek. "Revenge isn't always sweet." This isn't about revenge. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure. It's about justice, making things right. The doorbell rang again, and voices filled the hallway. Our anniversary guests arriving. I heard Mateo's booming laugh, saw Angela's silver hair through the window. "We should get ready," Javier said, but he didn't move. "Are you sure you want to do this?" I thought about the day my parents turned their backs on me, the empty chairs at our wedding, the birth of our first child, announced through Sadie because our parents wouldn't accept the news directly. A decade of holidays spent creating new traditions because the old ones had been ripped away. "Yes," I said firmly. "Tomorrow we'll hear what they have to say. But this time, we set the terms." Javier kissed my forehead. "Together? Together." I squeezed his hand, then straightened my shoulders. "Now, let's go celebrate 10 years of proving them wrong." As we walked toward our waiting guests, I couldn't help but smile at the irony. My parents had been so worried about Javier destroying their legacy. Instead, he might be the only one who could save it. Tomorrow would be interesting indeed. I arrived at Riverside Cafe 20 minutes early, choosing a corner table that gave me a clear view of the entrance. My hands shook slightly as I arranged the manila folder containing our company's portfolio. A decade of success laid out in crisp numbers and glossy photos. The bell above the door chimed, and there they were. My mother, her hair more silver than I remembered, clutching her designer purse like a shield. My father, shoulders slightly stooped now, but still carrying himself with that unmistakable pride. They spotted me immediately. "Brinley." My mother's voice wavered. She moved as if to hug me, then stopped herself, settling into the chair across from me instead. You look wonderful." "Success agrees with me." I kept my voice neutral, professional. "Would you like to order first, or should we get straight to business?" "Always direct," my father said, a ghost of approval in his tone. Just like you," I cut him off. "Let's not pretend we're here for a family reunion." A waitress appeared and we ordered coffee. The silence stretched until she returned with our drinks. "The store is 3 months away from bankruptcy," my father finally said, his hands wrapped tightly around his cup. "Everything we've built, everything my father built. And his father before him," I finished. "I remember the speech, Dad. The one about legacy and tradition. The one you gave right before you told me I was no longer welcome in the family." My mother flinched. "We were wrong, Brinley. So terribly wrong." "Were you? Or are you only saying that because you need something from me now?" "We've lost touch with our customers," my father continued, ignoring the tension. "The world's changed, and we haven't kept up." I pulled out my tablet, pulling up the store's public financial records. "Your online presence is non-existent, your inventory system is outdated, and your main competitor is about to open a store 3 blocks away." They exchanged surprised looks. "You've been keeping tabs on us?" my mother asked. "I keep tabs on all potential clients." I smiled thinly, though I never expected you'd become one. "Will you help us?" My father reached across the table, stopping just short of touching my hand. "Your company, Javier's expertise in digital transformation, your marketing skills, we need you. Both of us." I raised an eyebrow. "The same Javier you said wasn't good enough for your daughter, for your precious family business?" "Yes," my mother whispered. "Both of you." I opened the manila folder, sliding across a document. "These are our standard consulting terms, but for you, I have additional conditions." "What conditions?" My father's pride flickered back to life. "First, a public announcement of our partnership. Not just a press release, but a formal event. You'll acknowledge Javier and me as your daughter and son-in-law, and you'll apologize for your past actions." "Brinley, please," my mother started, but I held up my hand. "Second, you'll attend family dinners, monthly, at our house. You'll get to know your grandchildren, the ones you've pretended don't exist for 10 years. My father's face reddened. "You're using our desperation to force... To force what, Dad? Basic human decency? Family connection? The things you denied us because of your prejudice?" "We'll do it," my mother said suddenly. My father turned to her in shock. "We'll do whatever it takes. We've lost too much already." I pulled out a business card and placed it on the table. "Call this number tomorrow. It's Javier's direct line. He'll handle the initial consultation." "You won't be there?" my mother asked, looking stricken. "Oh, I'll be involved. But first, Javier needs to assess whether your business can actually be saved, and you need to prove you can treat him with the respect he deserves." I stood, gathering my things. "One more thing. Sadie told me you're having Sunday dinner this weekend. I expect an invitation. For all of us. The children too?" My mother's eyes lit up despite herself. "Yes, it's time they met their grandparents, assuming you're ready to be grandparents." As I turned to leave, my father called out, "Brinley, wait!" I paused. "Are you doing this to punish us?" I looked back at them, these proud, stubborn people who had shaped me in more ways than I cared to admit. "No, Dad. I'm doing this to fix what's broken. All of it. Walking out of the cafe, I pulled out my phone and dialed Javier. "How did it go?" he asked. "They agreed to everything, but you were right. This isn't about revenge anymore. It's about healing." "Ready for Sunday dinner?" I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. "Not even close, but it's time, isn't it?" "Sí, mi amor. It's time." The doorbell rang at exactly 3 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. My daughter Sophia, 8 years old and vibrating with excitement, raced to answer it. "Wait," I called, smoothing my dress nervously. "Let Mommy get it." But it wasn't my parents at the door. It was Sadie, holding a bottle of wine and wearing an apologetic smile. "Thought you might need reinforcements." "Aunt Sadie!" Sophia launched herself forward. Behind her, 6-year-old Marco peeked around the corner. "There's my favourite niece and nephew." Sadie hugged Sophia, then beckoned to Marco. "Come here, shy boy. I brought cookies." "You're early," I said, taking the wine. "On purpose." Sadie followed me to the kitchen, the kids trailing behind. "Mum's been ironing Dad's shirt 3 times. They're terrified." "Good," I muttered, then caught myself as Sophia looked up questioningly. "Why don't you two go show Aunt Sadie your new playroom?" Once the kids were out of earshot, Sadie grabbed my arm. "Listen, there's something you should know. Angela visited Mom yesterday." "Angela? Dad's old business partner's wife?" "She told them about River Valley Mall's expansion plans. They're not just opening one store near ours, they're planning to take over the whole district. Mom and Dad's store won't survive 6 months, let alone a year." I leaned against the counter, processing this. "That's why they're so desperate. There's more." Sadie lowered her voice. "Angela's son works for River Valley. She said they specifically targeted our area because they knew the store was vulnerable. They're using Mom and Dad's outdated systems against them." The doorbell rang again. This time, there was no mistaking the formal measured chimes. My parents' signature ring. "Show time." Sadie squeezed my hand. I opened the door to find my mother clutching a casserole dish, my father standing stiffly behind her. "Welcome," I said, stepping aside. "We brought your favourite," Mom said quickly. "Chicken enchiladas. I got the recipe from that cooking show you used to love. The one you said was too ethnic for your kitchen." The words slipped out before I could stop them. Dad's face tightened, but Mom pressed on. "I was wrong about a lot of things, Brinley. The show, the food, everything." "Abuela!" Sophia appeared in the hallway, Marco half hidden behind her. "That's what you are, right? Our abuela?" Mom's eyes filled with tears. She set down the casserole dish with trembling hands and knelt, opening her arms. "Yes, mi querida. I'm your abuela." Sophia looked at me for permission. I nodded, and she stepped forward into my mother's embrace. Marco followed cautiously. "And I'm your abuelo," Dad said gruffly, his voice thick. "No," came a firm voice from behind us. Javier stood in the doorway, his expression hard. "You haven't earned that title yet. The kids will call you Mr. Carter until you prove you deserve more." A tense silence fell. Then Dad nodded slowly. "Fair enough." "Dinner's ready," I announced, ushering everyone toward the dining room. "Sophia, Marco, wash your hands, please." As the kids scampered off, Javier pulled out chairs for my parents. "Before we eat, I should tell you, I've reviewed your preliminary financials. The situation is worse than you've admitted." "How did you—" Dad started. "I have connections at the bank," Javier cut in. "If you want our help, no more secrets. River Valley Mall isn't just your competition. They're planning to destroy you." Mom's hand flew to her throat. "Angela told you." "No, my research team did. The question is, why didn't you tell us the full truth?" "Pride," Dad admitted quietly. "The same pride that cost us our daughter for 10 years. "Well, pride won't save your store," I said, serving the enchiladas. "But we might be able to, if you're willing to make real changes." "Whatever it takes," Mom said, watching Sophia and Marco return to the table. "We've missed too much already." The rest of dinner passed in a strange dance of awkward pauses and cautious conversations. The kids, oblivious to the undertones, chatted happily about school and their upcoming soccer games. As my parents prepared to leave, Mom hugged me tightly. "The enchiladas weren't as good as yours," she whispered. "Will you teach me?" "Baby steps, Mom," I said, but I was smiling. "Let's start with saving the store." After they left, Sadie lingered. "That went better than expected." "Maybe," I said, watching Javier put the kids to bed through the window. "But the real test starts tomorrow when we begin dismantling everything they've built to save what matters most." "The store?" "No," I shook my head. "The family." "This is worse than I imagined," Javier said, standing in the middle of my parents' store. Ancient inventory systems hummed in the corner and dust collected on half-empty shelves. "They're still using software from 2005. I ran my finger along a shelf, leaving a clean line in the dust. "Remember when you offered to upgrade their systems before our wedding? And your father said he'd rather close the store than let an outsider change things?" Mateo appeared from the stockroom, tablet in hand. "Well, he almost got his wish." Mateo, our head of operations, had been my friend since college and Javier's right-hand man in the business. He knew our history, knew exactly how much this project meant. "The inventory's a mess," he continued. "They're ordering stock based on gut feeling rather than data. And their supplier contracts," he whistled low. "They're being robbed blind." The bell above the door chimed and my parents walked in. Mum's eyes were red-rimmed, Dad's jaw set tight. "We've been here all morning," I said, gesturing to the scattered papers and open laptops. "Want to hear the truth?" "All of it," Dad said, though he looked like he'd rather run. "You're 3 weeks away from complete collapse, not 3 months," Javier said bluntly. "Your suppliers are overcharging you by 40%. Your inventory system is hemorrhaging money, and your customer base has dropped by 65% in the last year alone." Mum sank into a nearby chair. "But how? We've run this store the same way for—" "That's exactly the problem," I cut in. "The world changed, but you didn't, just like with me and Javier." "Brinley," Dad warned, but I pressed on. "No, Dad, you need to hear this. You rejected change in your personal life, and you rejected it in business. Now both are falling apart." "We can fix the business," Mateo interjected smoothly, pulling up projections on his tablet. "But it'll require complete modernization, new systems, new marketing, new everything." "How much?" Dad asked. "500,000, minimum," Javier said, "plus our standard consulting fees." "We don't have that kind of money," Mom whispered. "No," I agreed. "But Javier and I do. We're offering to buy in as partners. 51% stake." The colour drained from Dad's face. "Majority control? You want to take over my father's store?" "I want to save it," I corrected. "But we can't do that if you fight us every step of the way. No more pride, remember?" The door chimed again. Angela walked in, her face falling when she saw us all gathered. "Angela," Mom stood quickly. "We're in the middle of something." "I can see that." Angela's eyes darted between us. "I just came to check. That is, I wanted to see how you were doing." "Spying for your son at River Valley?" Mateo asked casually. Angela's gasp was all the confirmation we needed. Mom turned to her, betrayal written across her face. "You've been feeding them information?" "Desiree? Angela backed toward the door. "They offered to help Tommy get promoted if—" "Get out!" Dad's voice was ice. 20 years of friendship, and you've been helping them destroy us." After Angela fled, silence fell heavy in the store. Finally, Dad turned to Javier. 51%? "Yes, but with conditions beyond what Brinley already stated." Javier pulled out a contract. "You'll both take courses in modern retail management. You'll attend weekly family dinners, not just monthly. And you'll publicly apologize to Brinley at the reopening ceremony." "When?" Mom asked quietly. 3 weeks, I said. "We'll close for renovations, rebuild everything from the ground up, just like we're rebuilding this family." Dad picked up the contract, his hands shaking slightly. "We were wrong about you, Javier. About everything." "I know," Javier said simply. The question is, what are you going to do about it now? Dad looked at Mom, who nodded tearfully. He picked up a pen and signed, then passed it to her to do the same. "Welcome to the new Carter family store," Matteo grinned, though we might want to update that name too. "McGregor Carter Marketplace," I suggested, "blending traditions just like our family." Dad opened his mouth as if to object, then stopped himself. "Yes," he said instead. That sounds right." As Matteo and Javier began discussing renovation plans, Mom pulled me aside. "We don't deserve this second chance." "No," I agreed. "But family isn't about deserving. It's about choosing to try again, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." Through the window, I could see River Valley's new sign being installed down the street. They thought they were circling a dying business, but they didn't know what was coming. They didn't know about the strength of a family finally learning to bend instead of break. "These numbers don't add up," I muttered, spreading financial documents across our dining room table. It was past midnight, but something had been nagging at me all day. "Javier, come look at this." He leaned over my shoulder, frowning at the papers. "The supplier contracts?" "No, the bank statements. Look at these withdrawals from last year." I pointed to a series of transactions, large amounts, all going to the same account, but they're not listed in the official expenses. "Could be tax evasion?" Javier suggested, but I shook my head. "My father's too straight-laced for that. Something else is going on." My phone buzzed. "Sadie calling at this hour," I answered immediately. "You need to come to the store," she said without preamble. "Now, Mom and Dad are here, and they're fighting with someone." 20 minutes later, we pulled up to see lights blazing inside the closed store. Through the windows, I could see my parents facing off against a man I didn't recognize. "That's Richard from the bank," Javier whispered as we approached the door. "Their loan officer." We walked in to catch the middle of the argument. "You promised us more time," Dad was saying, his face red with anger. "That was before you brought in outside investors," Richard shot back. "The terms of our agreement were clear." "What agreement?" I demanded, making them all jump. Mom turned pale. "Brinley, you shouldn't be here." "What agreement?" I repeated harder this time. Richard smiled unpleasantly. "Should I tell her, or would you like to?" "We took out a private loan last year," Dad said quietly. "Against the store." "From?" "River Valley's parent company," Richard said smugly, "with terms that give them first right of purchase if the store changes ownership, which you just triggered with your little partnership deal." The pieces clicked into place. The mysterious withdrawals, Angela's surveillance, all of it. "You set them up," I said to Richard. "You knew they were desperate and you gave them a poison pill." "Business is business," he shrugged. "River Valley wants this location and now they'll get it. Unless you can come up with $3 million by the end of the week." "$3 million?" Javier exclaimed. "The loan was for $500,000. Plus interest and penalties." Richard pulled out a document. "All legally binding." "Get out," I said quietly. "Now." After he left, I turned to my parents. "When were you going to tell us?" "We thought we could fix it," Mom whispered. "We were ashamed." "Ashamed?" I laughed bitterly. "Like you were ashamed of me. Is that why you keep hiding things?" "That's not fair," Dad protested. "No, what's not fair is asking for our help while holding back information that could sink everything," I was shouting now. "We invested our money, our time, our trust in you." "Mi amor," Javier touched my arm. "Let's focus on solutions." "Solutions?" I threw up my hands. "They need $3 million in 5 days." "Actually," came a new voice, "they don't." We all turned to see Matteo in the doorway, holding his tablet. "I've been doing some digging since those numbers didn't look right to me either. Richard's been cooking the books at the bank. He's been working with River Valley to force small businesses into bad loans, then taking kickbacks." "Can you prove it?" Javier asked sharply. Matteo grinned. "Already sent the evidence to the Banking Commission and the FBI. Richard's going to have bigger problems than this store very soon." Relief flooded through me, followed quickly by exhaustion. I sank into a chair, looking at my parents. No more secrets. Promise me. No more secrets, they said together. Good. I stood up. Because the reopening event is in 2 weeks, and we need to make it big. River Valley wants a war. Let's give them one. What are you thinking? Sadie asked. We're going to throw the biggest grand reopening this town has ever seen. Every media outlet, every influential person in the community will be there. And when Richard and River Valley's schemes come to light, I smiled grimly. Well, let's just say their new store won't have many customers. It's risky, Dad cautioned. Riskier than taking a predatory loan and hiding it from your family. He winced. Point taken. Matteo, I turned to him. Get me everything you have on Richard and River Valley. Mom, Dad, I need a list of every business owner they've tried this with. Sadie, start calling media contacts. And me? Javier asked, eyes twinkling. You and I are going to redesign this store until it makes River Valley look like a corner shop. As everyone dispersed to their tasks, Mom caught my arm. We don't deserve you, mihija. You're right, I said, but softened it with a smile. But you're stuck with me anyway. That's what family means. Looking around at our makeshift war room, I felt a fierce pride. River Valley thought they were dealing with a weak family business. They were about to learn what happens when you mess with a family that's finally truly united. The morning of the grand reopening, I stood in front of the store, heart pounding. The old Carter family store sign had been replaced with sleek modern letters spelling out McGregor Carter Marketplace. The windows gleamed, displaying artfully arranged local products and digital screens showing our new farm-to-table partnerships. The press is starting to arrive, Matteo said, checking his tablet, and you'll never guess who just pulled up. I turned to see Richard stepping out of his car, looking considerably less smug than 2 weeks ago. The FBI investigation had made headlines yesterday. Mrs. McGregor, he said stiffly, approaching us. I believe we can come to some arrangement. Save it, I cut him off. The only arrangement you'll be making is with federal prosecutors. You don't understand, he lowered his voice. River Valley's executives are on their way. They're prepared to offer twice the market value for the store. Javier appeared beside me, like they did with the Thompsons' bakery, the Chen's grocery, all those other families you helped them squeeze out. Richard's face reddened. Those were legitimate business deals. Those were predatory loans designed to fail, came my father's voice. He walked up, standing tall in his new suit. And we have proof. More cars were pulling up, news vans, local business owners, community members. And yes, there they were. River Valley's executives, looking far less confident than usual. Places, everyone, Sadie called out. We're going live in 5 minutes. The crowd gathered around the store's entrance, where we'd set up a small stage. Camera crews jostled for position as Mom joined us, holding Sophia and Marco's hands. Ready, I whispered to my parents. Dad squeezed my shoulder. Ready to make things right. I stepped up to the microphone, scanning the crowd. Thank you all for coming. Today marks not just the reopening of a store, but the rebirth of a family legacy. The cameras flashed as I continued. For 3 generations, this store has served our community. But somewhere along the way, we lost sight of what matters most. We became so focused on tradition that we forgot about progress. So afraid of change that we pushed away the very people who could help us grow. I saw Richard trying to slip away, but 2 FBI agents were already moving to intercept him. My parents made a mistake 10 years ago when they rejected my husband, Javier, because he didn't fit their image of tradition. They made another mistake when they trusted the wrong people who promised to help save this store. The River Valley executives shifted uncomfortably as several reporters turned their cameras their way. But today isn't about mistakes. It's about second chances. About admitting when you're wrong and working to make it right. I turned to my parents. Mum? Dad? They stepped forward and my father took the microphone. His hands were shaking slightly, but his voice was clear. 10 years ago, I let pride and prejudice cost me my daughter. I couldn't see that change doesn't mean losing who you are. It means growing into something better. He turned to face Javier and me directly. I was wrong. about everything. And I'm sorry. Mom stepped up next, tears streaming openly. We're sorry. To our daughter, to our son-in-law, to our grandchildren who we denied for so long, and to our community who trusted us to serve them honestly. I saw several reporters wiping their eyes as Mom continued, detailing River Valley's predatory practices and the families they'd hurt. The executives were already retreating to their cars, trailed by shouting journalists. And so, I returned to the microphone, we're not just reopening a store, we're starting fresh, with new ideas, new partnerships, and most importantly, a renewed commitment to family, both blood and chosen. The ribbon-cutting ceremony that followed was a blur of cameras and congratulations. Local business owners came forward with their own stories of River Valley's tactics. The FBI made their move on Richard. But what I remember most was the moment Sophia tugged on my mother's sleeve and said, "Can I call you abuela now?" The tears that sprang to Mom's eyes had nothing to do with the cameras. Later, as the crowd filtered into the store to explore, Javier pulled me aside. "Look," he nodded toward the checkout area where Dad was showing Marco how to work the new digital register system. "Never thought I'd see the day," I murmured. "Change isn't always bad," Mom said, joining us. "Sometimes it's exactly what we need." She hesitated, then added, "We're having Sunday dinner at our house this week. If you're all free." I looked at Javier, who smiled and nodded. "We'll be there," I said. All of us. Outside, workers were already taking down River Valley's coming soon sign down the street. Inside, our family was finally, truly, coming together. Sometimes revenge doesn't look like punishment. Sometimes it looks like healing, like growth, like love finding its way home. Sunday dinner at my parents' house felt surreal. The formal dining room I remembered from childhood had been transformed, the heavy curtains drawn back, family photos added to the walls, including several of my wedding that had been hidden away for a decade. "Sophia, careful with the salad bowl," Mom called out as my daughter proudly carried it to the table. "Marco, would you help Abuela with the plates?" The word abuela still sounded strange coming from my mother's lips, but the smile it brought to Marco's face made it worth it. "Something smells amazing," Sadie said, walking in with a bottle of wine. She stopped short at the sight of the table. "Mom, are those—" "Enchiladas," Mom said, slightly defensive. "I've been practicing all week, Brinley's recipe." "With help," I added, sharing a smile with Javier. We'd spent 3 evenings teaching her, each session filled with more laughter than awkwardness. Dad emerged from his study, where he'd been reviewing the store's first-week numbers with Mateo. "Sales are up 200% from our previous best week," he announced, "and the online orders are overwhelming our system," Mateo finished. "Good problem to have." We settled around the table, the conversation flowing easier than I'd expected. Sophia was telling Mom about her soccer tournament when the doorbell rang. "Are we expecting someone else?" I asked. Mom and Dad exchanged glances. "Actually, yes," Dad said, getting up. "We invited Angela." The room went silent. I felt Javier tense beside me. "Before you say anything," Mom held up her hand, "just listen to her, please." Angela walked in, looking smaller somehow, clutching a familiar casserole dish. "I brought the green bean casserole," she said quietly, "like I used to." "Sit," Dad gestured to an empty chair. "Tell them what you told us." Angela set down the dish and took a shaky breath. "I've known your parents since before you were born, Brinley. Watched you grow up. When they cut you out, I should have said something. Should have fought harder. That doesn't explain why you helped River Valley," I said coldly. "No, it doesn't." She squared her shoulders. "Tommy, my son, he got in trouble, gambling debts. River Valley offered to help if I helped them. I was weak, scared. But seeing your family come together these past weeks, watching you all fight for each other..." She wiped her eyes. "I've given the FBI everything. All the communications, the secret meetings, everything. That's why the charges against Richard were expanded," Mateo realized. "Your testimony." Angela nodded. "River Valley's executives are being indicted next week. Tommy's agreed to testify too, in exchange for immunity." "Why tell us this now?" Javier asked. Because I owe you the truth. All of you. She looked at my parents. Your friendship meant everything to me. I betrayed that. I know I can't fix it, but... She pulled out an envelope. This is my resignation from the store's board of directors and a cashier's check for my shares. Dad took the envelope but didn't open it. 20 years of friendship doesn't disappear overnight, Angela. Neither does betrayal. But if we can forgive ourselves for what we did to Brinley, we can try to forgive you too, Mom finished. I looked at my children, watching this adult drama unfold with wide eyes. What were we teaching them about forgiveness, about family? Stay for dinner, I heard myself say. Not because everything's okay, but because this is how we make it okay. Sophia jumped up. You can sit next to me. I'm learning Spanish from Abuelo, want to hear? The tension broke as Sophia launched into her newly learned phrases, making everyone laugh at her enthusiastic pronunciation. As we ate, I watched the strange family tableau before me. My parents teaching my children Spanish, Angela sharing stories about my rebellious teenage years, Sadie and Mateo arguing playfully about the store's next promotion, Javier's hand warm in mine under the table. I have an announcement, Dad said as we finished eating. Your mother and I have been talking. We're stepping back from day-to-day operations at the store. What? Sadie and I said together. We'll stay on as advisors, Mom added. But it's time for the next generation to take over. All of you, together. Besides, Dad smiled, we need more time for grandparent duties. Sophia's soccer games, Marco's art classes, and maybe, Mom looked at me hopefully, weekly family dinners instead of monthly. I squeezed Javier's hand, feeling the years of hurt and anger finally, truly beginning to heal. I think we can manage that. To family, Sadie raised her glass. Old and new, chosen, and blood. To second chances, Angela added softly. To love, Javier said, looking at me with the same warmth I'd fallen for all those years ago. To all of it, I said, raising my glass to meet theirs. To everything we lost and everything we found again. Ready for this? Javier asked, straightening my necklace as we stood in the store's back office. Almost. I checked my reflection one last time. The local business awards ceremony would be starting soon, and our entire family was gathered for the announcement. Mom! Sophia burst in, wearing her first real party dress. Abuela's crying again. Happy tears, Mom said, following her in. The stores never looked better. She gestured to the wall where our old family photos now hung alongside news clippings about River Valley's executives being sentenced, our store's revival and the community's support. The ceremony's starting, Mateo poked his head in. They want us all out there. We filed into the main store area, transformed for tonight's event. Local business owners, community leaders, and reporters filled the space. Dad stood at the podium, looking more relaxed than I'd ever seen him. When I took over this store from my father, he began, I thought I knew everything about running a business, about family, about life. He paused, finding my eyes in the crowd. I was wrong. The audience chuckled. This past year taught me that success isn't about holding on to the past. It's about embracing change. My daughter and son-in-law showed me that. They took a failing store and transformed it into something extraordinary. Not by erasing our history, but by building on it. I felt Javier's arm tighten around my waist as Dad continued. Tonight, we're not just celebrating McGregor Carter Marketplace winning Business of the Year. We're celebrating all the small businesses that stood together against corporate predators. We're celebrating family in all its forms. Angela, sitting with her son Tommy in the back, wiped her eyes. Their testimony had helped bring down River Valley's entire operation, protecting countless other family businesses. And so, Dad's voice grew stronger. I'm proud to announce our next chapter. We're launching a foundation to help other family businesses modernize and thrive, to offer the same second chance we received. Gasps and applause filled the room. This was the secret we'd been planning for months. The first grant, Mom stepped up to the microphone, goes to Thompson's Bakery to help them rebuild after River Valley's predatory practices. Mrs. Thompson burst into tears as her daughter hugged her. They'd lost everything to River Valley's schemes, and this would give them a fresh start. The foundation will be run by our children, Dad gestured to us. Brinley, Javier, and Sadie, because they understand better than anyone how to blend tradition with progress. As applause filled the room, Sophia tugged on my dress. Mama, can I tell them now? I nodded, lifting her onto the stage. My fearless 8-year-old grabbed the microphone. Hi everyone, I'm Sophia, and I have a surprise for my abuela and abuelo. She beamed at my parents. I entered our store's story in my school's writing contest, about how my family came back together. And I won. More applause as Sophia pulled out her carefully folded pages. Can I read it? Of course, mi amor, Javier called out. Once upon a time, Sophia began, my mama's parents didn't want my papa in their family because he was different. But then their store got sick, like when I got strep throat, and they needed help. Mama and papa fixed the store, but more importantly, they fixed our family. I watched my parents' faces as Sophia read, saw the tears and smiles as she described our journey through a child's eyes. Marco joined her on stage halfway through, adding his own commentary about Sunday dinners and learning Spanish with abuelo. When she finished, Dad lifted her into a tight hug. That's going on our wall, he declared, pointing to the family photo display. Later, as the party wound down, I found myself behind the old register where I'd worked as a teenager. The modern touchscreen glowed beside vintage photos of the store's early days. Penny for your thoughts? Sadie joined me, bumping my shoulder. Remember when I wanted revenge? I laughed softly. I thought making them need us would be the perfect payback. And instead we all got something better. We got our family back. Mom appeared with coffee cups. Your father's showing Marco how to count the register. Again. Third time this week, I smiled. He's making up for lost time, Mom said quietly. We both are. Through the window, I could see the empty shell of what would have been River Valley's store. The community had voted to turn it into a small business incubator instead. You know what's funny? I said, watching Sophia teach Mateo her victory dance while Javier and Dad laughed. I thought I was teaching you and Dad about change, about acceptance, but really... We all learned together, Mum finished, squeezing my hand. And there it was, the real victory. Not in revenge or redemption, but in the simple joy of a family dinner to plan, a store to run, and a future to build. Together. The day I chose Alice was the day my mother stopped calling me her daughter. I didn't expect it to happen quite like that, in the middle of our family's marble-floored foyer, with the crystal chandelier casting judgmental shadows across her face. My name is Sierra, and until that moment, I'd been the perfect Blair daughter. Ivy League educated, successful in the family business, and, according to my mother, just one good marriage away from completing the picture-perfect life she'd planned for me. You can't be serious, my mother said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Adoption? Have you lost your mind? I stood my ground, though my hands were trembling. I've met her, Mom. Alice is incredible. She's brilliant, kind, and she's not blood, my father interrupted, emerging from his study. His presence filled the room like a storm cloud. The Blair name means something, Sierra. We don't just take in strays. The word strays hit me like a physical blow. I'd seen Alice's file 3 months ago, a 12-year-old girl who'd lost her parents in a car accident. The moment I met her, something clicked. She had this way of looking at the world that made everything seem possible. Dad, if you'd just meet her. This discussion is over, he said, turning back toward his study. Either come to your senses or what? I challenged, my voice stronger than I felt. You'll cut me off? Disinherit me? Go ahead. My mother gasped. My sister Natalie, who'd been hovering in the doorway, stepped forward. Sierra, please, think about what you're doing. I have thought about it. For months. Alice needs a family and We are your family! My mother's voice cracked. Everything we've built, everything we've worked for. You'd throw it all away for some what, Mom? Some orphan? I pulled out my phone and showed them Alice's picture. Look at her, Really look at her. But they wouldn't. My mother turned away and my father's study door slammed shut. Natalie reached for my arm. Give them time. Maybe if you wait. I can't wait. The adoption hearing is next week. I took a deep breath. I'm not asking for permission. I'm telling you I'm becoming a mother. Then you're no daughter of mine. My mother's words fell like ice. Get out. I'd prepared myself for resistance, but this felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed. Mom, out! I walked to the door, my heels clicking against the marble floor. Each step echoed with finality. At the threshold, I turned back one last time. You know what's funny? Alice asked me yesterday what her new grandparents would be like. She was so excited to meet you. My mother's face twitched, but she held her ground. Natalie looked between us, tears in her eyes. Nat, I said softly, you're welcome to meet your niece any time. The drive home was a blur. I pulled into my driveway and sat there, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. My phone buzzed, a text from the adoption agency confirming tomorrow's pre-placement visit. I opened my gallery and found the video from last week. Alice sat cross-legged on the floor of the group home, explaining her science project to me. Her eyes lit up as she described how she'd built a small wind turbine from recycled materials. And see, Sierra, she'd said, pointing to the tiny blades spinning in front of a fan. It actually works. Do you think when I come home we could build a bigger one? When I come home. Not if. When. I wiped my eyes and typed a quick response to the agency. Looking forward to tomorrow's visit. Everything's ready. Because it was. The guest room had been transformed into a space for a 12-year-old girl who loved science and art. The walls were painted her favourite shade of blue, and a desk by the window waited for her projects. On the bookshelf, engineering books sat next to Harry Potter. My phone buzzed again. Natalie. They'll come around. They have to. But Sierra, are you sure about this? I thought about Alice's smile. About the way she'd hugged me goodbye last week, about how she'd whispered, "See you soon, Mom," when she thought I couldn't hear. More sure than I've ever been about anything, I texted back. Tomorrow I'd sign the papers that would make me Alice's mother. My parents might have written me out of their story, but Alice and I? We were about to write our own. And somehow, watching the last rays of sunlight fade from the sky, I knew that would be enough. More than enough. It would be everything. Mom, I think I solved it. Alice burst into my home office, waving a notebook filled with calculations. 3 years had passed since the adoption, and my 15-year-old daughter had grown into a force of nature. I pushed away from my laptop, grateful for the interruption from quarterly reports. Solved what, sweetie? The solar panel efficiency problem I've been working on. Look! She spread her notes across my desk, pointing excitedly at diagrams. If we adjust the angle and add this coating I developed. The doorbell interrupted her explanation. Through the window, I spotted Natalie's car in the driveway. Alice's face fell slightly. Is that Aunt Natalie again? Why don't you head upstairs and finish your homework? I'll handle this. She gathered her notes, hesitating at the door. Tell her I said hi. I guess. These surprise visits from Natalie had become more frequent lately. I opened the front door to find my sister clutching her designer purse like a shield. Mom's sick, she blurted out before I could speak. My heart skipped. How sick? Nothing serious, just the flu. But she's been asking about Alice. Natalie stepped inside, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. She saw the article about Alice winning the state science fair. They have Google Alerts set up for us now. I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. Sierra, please. They're trying in their way. Natalie sank onto the couch. Dad's business is struggling. The market's changing and he's... Well, you know how he is about change. I did know. The man who refused to modernize his email system was probably having a hell of a time adapting to current market demands. What do they want, Nat? Because if they're expecting me to come crawling back... No, nothing like that. Just... maybe bring Alice to Sunday dinner? Let them meet her properly? I laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. After 3 years of pretending she doesn't exist, After missing every birthday, every achievement, people can change, Natalie insisted. Quinton's been talking to Dad, trying to... Mum, is everything okay? Alice stood at the top of the stairs, concern etched on her face. Natalie turned, and I saw her eyes widen. The gangly 12-year-old in the adoption photos had grown into a poised teenager with bright eyes and her father's old lab coat that I'd gotten her for Christmas. Alice, Wow, you've grown so much. That tends to happen in 3 years, Alice replied coolly, descending the stairs. I heard you mention Sunday dinner. Don't worry about us, we have plans. We do, I asked. Yeah, remember, Lane's coming over to help me with the prototype, and you promised to make your famous lasagna. I hadn't promised any such thing, but I played along. Right, of course. Natalie's face fell. Another time, maybe. Alice reached the bottom of the stairs and stood beside me. You know what's funny? I used to dream about having grandparents who'd be proud of me. Now, I'm kind of glad they stayed away. Because Mom, she squeezed my hand. She's been enough. More than enough. Natalie's eyes filled with tears. Alice, they made mistakes, but... Mistakes, Alice's voice sharpened. Is that what we're calling it? They threw their daughter out for choosing to love someone who needed love. That's not a mistake, that's a choice. Alice, I whispered, squeezing her hand back. No, Mom, they need to hear this. She turned back to Natalie. Tell them I'm not interested in their guilt or their late attempts at connection. Tell them I'm too busy revolutionizing solar energy efficiency and making my mom proud. Natalie stood, clutching her purse tighter. I'll tell them you're both doing well. After she left, I pulled Alice into a hug. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. She pulled back, her eyes fierce. Nobody gets to hurt you anymore, not even them. Especially not them. When did you get so protective? Learned from the best. She grinned suddenly. But you do actually have to make lasagna now. Lane really is coming over to help with the prototype. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Deal. But first, show me these calculations you were excited about. As Alice launched into her explanation, my phone buzzed with a text from Natalie. Dad's company lost another major contract. He's desperate but won't admit it. Please think about Sunday dinner. I turned my phone face down and focused on my daughter's animated description of solar panel coefficients. Let them worry about their precious family business. Alice and I had built something far more valuable, a family based on choice, not obligation. But as I watched her sketch diagrams in the air, a small part of me wondered if karma wasn't already setting its wheels in motion. After all, the brilliant young scientist they'd rejected might just hold the key to saving everything they held dear. They're filing for bankruptcy protection, Quinton said over coffee. My brother-in-law had suggested meeting at a quiet cafe across town, away from prying eyes. Your father's too proud to admit it publicly, but the company's bleeding money. I stirred my latte, watching the foam swirl. How bad? Bad enough that they're selling the summer house, the one in Martha's Vineyard. That hit hard. I'd spent every summer there until the estrangement. Dad would rather sell his kidney than that house. Times change, Quinton leaned forward. Look, I know you don't owe them anything, but you understand modern business better than anyone in the family. If you could just... Mom, Alice's voice cut through the cafe's quiet buzz. She stood at our table, still in her lab coat from her university internship, Lane hovering uncertainly behind her. Uncle Quinton. Alice, Quinton stood, smiling warmly. I haven't seen you since never, she finished coldly. Because you never visited either. Lane stepped forward, placing a protective hand on Alice's shoulder. We can come back later. No, stay. I gestured to the empty chairs. Quinton was just leaving. Actually, Alice said, sliding into a seat, maybe he should hear this. She pulled out her tablet. Lane and I just came from the lab. We've perfected the solar coating. My heart skipped. She'd been working on this project for months, refusing to show anyone but Lane and me until it was ready. The what? Quinton asked. A nanotech coating that increases solar panel efficiency by 40%. Lane explained, his eyes bright with excitement. It's revolutionary. Alice pulled up graphs and charts. We've run all the tests. It works. And the manufacturing cost is minimal compared to the energy output increase. I watched Quinton's face as understanding dawned. This could save millions in energy costs for large-scale operations. Like, say, a manufacturing company struggling to keep up with rising energy costs. Alice's smile was sharp. One that still uses outdated power systems in all its facilities. Quinton stared at her. You know about the company's problems. I know everything. Alice swiped through more documents. I've been monitoring the situation. Did you really think Mum wouldn't keep tabs on her father's life's work? I reached for her hand under the table, squeezing gently. Alice, we're presenting this at the Clean Energy Summit next month, she continued. Every major company in the industry will be there, including your biggest competitors. Quinton's coffee sat forgotten. Alice, if you're suggesting what I think, I'm not suggesting anything. She stood, gathering her things. I'm just letting you know that solutions exist. Whether pride allows certain people to see them, well, that's not my problem. Lane helped her with her coat, trying to hide a smile. We should head back to the lab, Alice. The final testing sequence. Right, she kissed my cheek. Don't work too late, Mom. Movie night, remember? After they left, Quinton let out a long breath. She's brilliant. Yes, she is. And she did this for you. To prove them wrong. I shook my head. No, she did this because she's passionate about sustainable energy. The fact that it might help the family business, that's just karma. They should know about this. Then tell them. I stood, gathering my purse. Tell them their granddaughter, the one they rejected, might hold the key to saving everything. Tell them she did it without their name, their money, or their approval. Sierra. Movie night with my daughter, remember? I headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Quinton, the summer house? Tell them not to sell it yet. Something tells me they might need liquid assets for technology upgrades soon. That evening, curled up on the couch with Alice watching her favorite sci-fi movie, I finally asked the question that had been burning in my mind. How long have you been working on this specifically for the company? She paused the movie, turning to face me. Since Aunt Natalie's visit 3 months ago, Lane helped me research their energy consumption patterns. Did you know they spend 4 times the industry average on power? Your grandfather isn't big on efficiency. Well, he's going to have to be. Her expression softened. I didn't do it for them, Mom. I did it because it's good technology that could help a lot of companies. But if they want it, they'll have to come to you. Exactly. She grinned suddenly. Want to be my +1 at the summit presentation? Wouldn't miss it for the world. I pulled her close, remembering the 12-year-old who built tiny wind turbines. You know I'm proud of you, right? Not because of this, but because of who you are. I know, Mom. She unpaused the movie. Now shush. This is the best part. But as the sci-fi drama unfolded on screen, I couldn't help thinking about another drama about to unfold. One where pride would face off against necessity, and where karma might finally come full circle. The family estate looked exactly the same, right down to the pretentious lion door knockers. I hadn't planned to return here, but Natalie's frantic call had left little choice. Family emergency meeting, she'd said. Dad's making some kind of announcement. Alice squeezed my hand as we stood at the door. Ready? Are you? Born ready. She smoothed her blazer, professional, polished, nothing like the rejected orphan they probably imagined. Besides, Lane's on standby if we need a quick escape. The door opened before we could knock. Natalie stood there, eyes wide. You came. Both of you. Let's not make it a bigger deal than it is, I said, stepping inside. The foyer still smelled of Mum's favourite potpourri. Family portraits lined the walls, a timeline of our lives, stopping abruptly 3 years ago. Alice studied them with clinical interest. Interesting gap in the family history, she murmured. Voices drifted from the living room. I recognised Dad's agitated tone, Mom's attempts to soothe him, and other voices. Board members, probably. Sierra. Mom stood in the doorway, looking older than I remembered. her eyes fixed on Alice. And Alice? Mrs. Blair, Alice replied coolly. Lovely home. The chandelier's gorgeous. Austrian crystal, right? Though the energy consumption must be astronomical. Mum flinched. Please come in. Your father's about to start. The living room fell silent as we entered. Dad stood by the fireplace, his usual power position, but something was off. His shoulders sagged, his hair greyer than ever. Sierra. He nodded stiffly. I wasn't sure you'd come. Natalie said it was important. It is. He cleared his throat, addressing the room. As you know, we've faced some challenges lately. Market changes, rising costs. Just say it, Kingsley, one board member interrupted. We're sinking. We're not sinking, Dad snapped. We're adapting, which is why I've called this meeting. I'm announcing my retirement. Gasps filled the room. Mum grabbed the nearest chair for support. The board will begin searching for a new CEO immediately, Dad continued. Someone who understands modern markets, someone who can... Actually, Alice's voice cut through the shock like a laser. I have a better idea. All eyes turned to her. She stood, pulling out her tablet with the same confidence she showed in the lab. Alice, I warned softly. Trust me, Mom. She connected her tablet to the room's projector. Mr. Blair, grandfather if you prefer, though you haven't earned that title, your company's main problem isn't leadership. It's inefficiency. Graphs appeared on the screen. Energy consumption rates, cost analyses, projection models. Your facilities use outdated systems that bleed money, but there's a solution. She pulled up her research. A proprietary nanotech coating that could cut your energy costs by 40%. The board members leaned forward. Dad's face reddened. Who do you think you are? He began. I'm the person who developed this technology, Alice cut in. The same person you rejected because I wasn't blood. Ironic, isn't it? This is preposterous, Dad sputtered. You're just a brilliant scientist, a board member finished. I read about your work in Tech Monthly. That coating, it's revolutionary, Alice smiled. Thank you. We're presenting at the Clean Energy Summit next month. Every major company will be there, including your competitors. The room erupted in urgent whispers. Dad gripped the mantle, knuckles white. What do you want? He asked finally. Want? Alice looked genuinely surprised. I don't want anything. I'm simply presenting options. You can either swallow your pride and work with me, or watch your life's work crumble because you couldn't see past your own prejudices. Mom stepped forward. Alice, please, we made mistakes. Mistakes? I stood beside my daughter. You threw us away, and now you want her help? The company's not just about us, Natalie interjected. Hundreds of employees depend on it. Alice's expression softened slightly. I know. That's why I'm here. But understand this. If we do this, we do it my way. No compromises, no conditions. Dad opened his mouth, closed it, then nodded once. Good. Alice gathered her things. Have your lawyers contact Mum's office to set up a meeting. We'll discuss terms then. As we turned to leave, she paused at the door. Oh, and grandmother, that chandelier. Switch to LED bulbs. Small changes make big differences. In the car, I finally found my voice. That was satisfying? She grinned. Just wait until they read my terms. Lane helped me draft them. They're going to love the environmental compliance clauses. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Mum, they hurt you. Hurt us. But instead of revenge, I'm offering salvation. She pulled out her phone to text Lane. Sometimes, the best revenge is forcing people to face their own failures, and then helping them fix them. I started the car, glancing one last time at the house. Through the window, I could see them all still standing there, shocked into silence by the hurricane that was my daughter. Ready to go home? I asked. Actually, she smiled. I think we just started something much bigger than going home. The conference room felt like a pressure cooker. On one side sat my father, mother, and 3 board members. On our side, Alice, Lane, our lawyer, and me. The contract lay between us like a loaded weapon. This is absurd, Dad exploded, throwing down his reading glasses. 51% control of environmental initiatives? Mandatory board positions for both of you? Complete restructuring of our energy systems within 18 months? Those are my terms, Alice replied calmly. The technology alone will save you millions annually. The restructuring will position you as an industry leader in sustainable manufacturing. We've operated the same way for 40 years, and that's exactly why you're failing. Alice pulled up projections on the wall screen. Your energy costs are crippling you. Your competitors are going green while you're burning money on outdated systems. Lane stepped in, his voice steady. We've run the numbers extensively. Even with implementation costs, you'll see return on investment within 2 years. Return on investment? Mom's voice quavered. This isn't just about money. This is our family legacy. Family? I couldn't help but laugh. Now you care about family? Sierra, our lawyer warned softly. No, let's talk about family, Alice said, standing. 3 years ago, you threw away your daughter because she chose to love someone who needed love. Now you're facing bankruptcy and suddenly family matters. The room fell silent. Even Dad couldn't meet her eyes. Here's what's going to happen, Alice continued. You'll sign this contract. I'll save your company. But understand this. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for the hundreds of employees who depend on their paychecks, for the environment. And yes, for my mother, who still checks your company's stock prices every morning because despite everything, she cares about her father's life's work. I felt tears prick my eyes. Dad looked at me sharply. You still follow the company? Every day, I admitted. Just because you stopped being my father doesn't mean I stopped being your daughter. Mum made a small, broken sound. The coating technology is just the beginning, Alice pressed on. I have plans for complete modernization, solar integration, waste reduction systems, but it happens on my terms. Or what? One board member asked. Or I take it to your competitors. They're already interested. She smiled. Very interested. Dad stood abruptly, pacing to the window. You're blackmailing us. No, I'm offering you salvation. The choice to take it is yours. Lane pulled out another document. We've also drafted a press release announcing the partnership. The market would respond very favourably to a family reconciliation story combined with green innovation. You've thought of everything, Dad said quietly. I learned from you, actually. Alice's voice softened slightly. You always said business is about leverage. Well, here we are. The board members huddled together, whispering urgently. Mom kept looking between Dad and me, her perfectly manicured hands twisting in her lap. Finally, Dad turned from the window. If, and I mean if, we agree to this, what guarantees do we have that you won't just take control and destroy everything? Because unlike you, Alice replied, I understand that family isn't about blood, it's about choice, and I'm choosing to help, despite everything. The question is, are you choosing to let me? The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Then Dad did something I'd never seen before. He sat down heavily, looking suddenly old. Where do I sign? Dad! Natalie burst out from the doorway where she'd been listening. You can't be serious. We don't have a choice, he said quietly. And maybe it's time we admitted that. Alice pushed the contract forward. As Dad reached for a pen, she added, One more thing. Mom gets her old office back, the corner one with the view. I stared at her. I hadn't asked for that. And Sunday dinners, she continued. Not every week, but sometimes, if Mom wants, because this only works if we actually try to be a family. Mom started crying openly now. Dad's hand shook as he signed. Welcome to the future of Blair Industries, Alice said, but her voice was gentle now. Let's build something better, together. As we gathered our things to leave, Mom caught my arm. Sierra, would you like to have lunch sometime? Just us? I looked at Alice, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Okay, I said. But not at the club. There's this little cafe near my office. Anywhere, Mom whispered. Anywhere you want. Outside, Lane hugged Alice tightly. You were amazing in there. Thanks for having my back. She turned to me. Mom, you okay? I pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo mixed with lab chemicals. You didn't have to add that part about Sunday dinners. Yes, I did. She pulled back, eyes bright. Because sometimes fixing things means more than just business plans and contracts. Sometimes it means giving people a chance to be better than they were. Looking back at the building, I wondered if she was right. If maybe, just maybe, karma wasn't about punishment after all. Maybe it was about giving people the opportunity to face their mistakes and choose a different path. They're sabotaging us, Lane burst into my office waving his tablet. The old guard in production is deliberately slowing down implementation. I looked up from my computer where I'd been reviewing the first phase of Alice's modernization plan. What do you mean? They're losing equipment orders, scheduling installation crews for the wrong dates, claiming system incompatibilities that don't exist. He pulled up a spreadsheet. We're 3 weeks behind schedule. Dad's people, I muttered. Of course they're resistant. My office door opened again, and Alice stormed in, her lab coat fluttering. Did you see the memo? They're trying to modify my coating formula without consulting me. What? I grabbed my phone to call Dad, but it already showed 3 missed calls from Natalie. Sierra, she said when I called back. It's bad. Dad's old VP of operations is rallying people against the changes. They're saying Alice is too young, too inexperienced. Too much of an outsider, I finished bitterly. You need to come to the main facility. Now. The factory floor was chaos when we arrived. Workers clustered in groups, arguing loudly. The installation team sat idle beside crates of new solar panels, while Dad's VP, Richard, held court near the control room. These changes will cost jobs, he was saying. This girl thinks she can waltz in and... This girl is saving your jobs, Lane shouted, pushing forward. Alice grabbed my arm. Mom, look at the control panel. I followed her gaze. The main power systems were running at dangerous levels, well above normal parameters. They're overloading the old system to prove it's more reliable, she whispered. But they've miscalculated. If those readings are accurate... A loud pop echoed through the facility, followed by cascading sparks from the main electrical panel. Emergency lights flashed as the backup system engaged. Everyone out, I shouted. Emergency shutdown. Workers scattered as smoke began pouring from the control room. Alice sprinted toward it, Lane close behind. Alice, no! I tried to grab her, but she was already punching numbers into the backup terminal. The main system's going to blow if we don't redirect power now. Her fingers flew over the keyboard. Lane, cut power to sectors 3 through 7. On it! I grabbed a fire extinguisher as more sparks flew. Through the chaos, I saw Dad and Mom rushing in, faces pale. What happened? Dad demanded. Your people happened, I shot back. They overloaded the system trying to prove Alice wrong. Another explosion rocked the facility. Alice's voice cut through the noise. Got it! Lane, now! The emergency lights flickered, then stabilized. The smoking control panel went dark as backup systems fully engaged. In the sudden quiet, Alice's voice carried clearly. That's what happens when you let pride override science. She turned to face the gathered workers. The old system just failed catastrophically. If we hadn't installed the backup system last week, against significant resistance, I might add, this whole facility would be dark right now. Richard stepped forward. Now see here. No, you see. Alice cut him off. I just saved this facility from a complete meltdown. Your little demonstration of reliability nearly caused millions in damage. Still want to question my competence? Dad pushed through the crowd. Richard, in my office. Now. He turned to Alice. How long until we can restore power? The new system can be online in an hour. The old one? She gestured at the smoking panel. That's dead. Permanently. Guess you'll have to use my inexperienced solution after all. Workers began drifting back to their stations, many nodding respectfully to Alice. Lane started directing the installation team to begin work on the remaining sectors. Mum touched my arm. She really does know what she's doing, doesn't she? She always has. I watched Alice confidently giving instructions to the maintenance crew. Maybe now they'll actually listen to her. Sierra, Dad called from across the floor, I need your help with the incident report. And Alice's, of course. It wasn't quite an apology, but his face showed something I'd rarely seen before. Respect. Alice joined us, still slightly smoky from the control room. Well, congratulations. You just got your modernization ahead of schedule. Sometimes the universe has a way of forcing change. The universe or a certain teenage genius. I smiled. Speaking of which, she checked her phone. The press will be here in 20 minutes. Something about a heroic young innovator saves family company. Lane's already handling it. Dad's eyes widened. The press? Welcome to modern business management, Alice said sweetly. Now, should we discuss expediting the remaining upgrades? Unless you'd prefer more electrical fires. As we walked toward Dad's office, I caught Alice's small smile. She'd known all along that something like this might happen, and she'd been prepared, turning their resistance into a public relations triumph. My daughter hadn't just inherited my determination, she'd improved upon it. And watching Dad's face as she outlined her accelerated implementation plan, I knew the last pieces of resistance were finally crumbling. Stock's up 70% since the modernization, Lane announced, bursting into the conference room where we were preparing for the company's centennial celebration. The press is calling us the Green Manufacturing Revolution. Alice barely looked up from her tablet. Did they mention the employee wellness programs too? Front page of the Business Journal, he confirmed, dropping a newspaper on the table. Along with a very flattering photo of you and Sierra at the factory reopening. 6 months had transformed the company. The old manufacturing floor now gleamed with solar panels and state-of-the-art equipment. Employee satisfaction was at an all-time high, and our carbon footprint had dropped dramatically. Your father wants to see you both, Mom said, entering with an armful of decorations. In his office, he says it's important. Alice and I exchanged glances. Despite the success, these meetings still carried the weight of years of tension. Dad stood at his office window holding something in his hands. Close the door, please. If this is about the new environmental compliance standards, Alice started, the data clearly shows... It's not about that. He turned, and I was surprised to see his eyes were wet. This is about family. He placed a wooden box on his desk. I recognized it immediately, the family heirloom box passed down through generations of Blairs. Dad, I was wrong, he said simply. About everything. About what makes a family strong. About what makes a business successful. About you, Sierra. And especially about you, Alice. Alice stepped forward cautiously. Mr. Blair, grandfather, he corrected softly. Please, if you'll allow it. He opened the box, revealing the antique compass that had guided our family's first business venture a century ago. This was supposed to go to my firstborn son, he continued, then to my firstborn daughter. But I let pride and tradition blind me to what was right in front of me, the most brilliant mind this family has ever produced. He lifted the compass and held it out to Alice. This belongs to you now. You've shown us all true north when we were lost. Alice's hands trembled as she took it. I don't know what to say. Say you'll stay, Mom blurted out. Both of you. Not just for business, but for Sunday dinners and holidays and everything we missed. There's more, Dad added, pulling out papers. I'm restructuring the company leadership. Sierra, you'll be CEO. Alice, Chief Innovation Officer with a seat on the board. If you want it. I felt tears threatening. Dad, let me finish. He took a deep breath. And I want to announce it at tonight's celebration. In front of everyone. Let them all see that this company's future isn't about blood. It's about vision. Your vision, Alice. Alice studied the compass, then looked up with that determined expression I knew so well. On one condition. Name it. The summer house? The one you almost sold? Turn it into a science camp for foster kids. Give other children the chances I got. Mom gasped softly. Dad's face worked with emotion. Already done, he said. The paperwork was filed last week. We're calling it the Alice Wilson Science Academy for Young Innovators. Alice launched herself into his arms, surprising everyone, especially Dad. After a moment's shock, he hugged her back fiercely. I'm so sorry, he whispered. So very sorry. Group hug, Lane called from the doorway, where he'd been not so subtly eavesdropping. Mom laughed through her tears and joined us. Later, as workers set up for the celebration, Alice and I stood on the factory floor, watching the sunset stream through the solar panels she'd designed. "You planned this all along, didn't you?" I asked. "From the moment you saw the company was in trouble?" She smiled, turning the compass over in her hands. "Not all of it. The science camp was a surprise, but the rest? Let's just say I learned from the best about playing the long game. From me. From all of you. Grandfather's strategic thinking, grandmother's attention to detail, your determination." She paused. "But mostly from you, Mom. You taught me that sometimes the greatest revenge is showing people a better way, and then helping them take it." The celebration hall was filling up. Through the windows we could see Dad practicing his speech, Mom fussing with his tie. "Ready to be officially announced as the future of the family business?" I asked. Alice tucked the compass into her pocket and straightened her blazer. "Actually, I think we already are the present. The future is what we make next." "And what's that?" She grinned, that brilliant, unstoppable grin that had first captured my heart in a group home years ago. "Well, Lane and I have been working on this new renewable energy concept as we walk toward our family, our whole, healing, imperfect family. I realized Alice was right. The best revenge wasn't about destroying the old, but about building something new and better from its foundations, and we were just getting started. "And now," Dad announced to the packed auditorium at the Alice Wilson Science Academy, "I'd like to introduce our first graduating class of young innovators." I watched from the side stage as 20 teenagers, all from foster homes, stood to thunderous applause. Each wore a lab coat with their name embroidered alongside the Academy logo, a compass pointing true north. Alice squeezed my hand. "They did it, Mom. Every single one got full scholarships." "Of course they did," Lane said, adjusting his camera. "They had you as a mentor." The summer house had transformed beautifully into a state-of-the-art campus. Solar panels glinted on every roof, and the old tennis courts were now testing grounds for renewable energy projects. Dad continued his speech, his voice strong despite recent health challenges. "When my granddaughter first proposed this academy, I didn't understand. Now watching these brilliant young minds flourish, I realized she saw something I couldn't, that potential knows no bloodlines." Mom dabbed at her eyes in the front row, sitting next to Natalie and Quinton. The family weekly dinners had become a tradition again, but different now, filled with lively debates about innovation and sustainability rather than rigid formality. "And speaking of potential," Dad said, "I'd like to share some news. Our company's Green Manufacturing Initiative, led by Alice, has just been awarded the Global Innovation Prize. But more importantly," he paused, looking directly at Alice, "the patent royalties from her technologies will fund similar academies across the country." This was news to me. I turned to Alice, who was trying not to smile. "Surprise," she whispered. "Karma works better when it keeps giving." The ceremony concluded with each student presenting their final projects. I watched Alice move among them, offering encouragement and adjustments, every bit the mentor she never had. "Ms. Wilson," one student, Maria, approached nervously, "I wanted to thank you, not just for the scholarship, but for showing us that family isn't about where you come from. It's about where you choose to go," Alice finished, hugging her, "and who you choose to become." Later, as the celebration wound down, we gathered in what used to be the summer house's formal dining room, now a cozy common area. Dad sat in his favourite armchair, the old family photos on the walls now mixed with pictures of academy students and their achievements. "I've been thinking," he said, watching Alice help students pack up their projects, "about what really makes a legacy." "And," I prompted, "I spent years worried about preserving the family name, but look at what she's built. Not just a successful business, but a way to lift others up. That's a true legacy." Mom joined us, carrying coffee. "Remember when you said we don't take in strays?" Dad winced. "I was an old fool." "Was?" Alice teased, joining us. "The board meeting last week suggests present tense." "Hey now," he chuckled. "I only argued against the flying solar drones because they seemed excessive. They're not flying solar drones, they're autonomous atmospheric monitoring platforms. Lane corrected, earning laughs from everyone. Natalie raised her coffee cup. To the next generation of innovators and the woman who showed us all a better way. No, Alice said firmly. To family, the one we're born with and the one we choose to build. As the evening light filtered through the solar windows Alice had designed, I watched my daughter surrounded by her students, my parents beaming with genuine pride, and Lane documenting everything for the Academy's newsletter. The wounds of rejection had healed into something stronger, something that could lift others out of similar pain. Mom, Alice called, Maria wants to show you her improved version of my solar coating. She's increased efficiency another 12%. Impossible, Dad said, but his eyes twinkled. Though I seem to recall saying that about your first design too. I joined them at the demonstration table where Maria's prototype glowed with possibility. Around us, other students gathered, eager to share their innovations, their dreams, their potential. This was Alice's real revenge, not destroying the old guard, but building a new generation that would make the old ways obsolete through sheer brilliance. She had taken rejection and turned it into a revolution of opportunity. Ready to head home? Lane asked as the last students left. Alice looked around the room, at the compass logo on the wall, at her grandfather dozing in his chair, at her grandmother arranging tomorrow's schedule, at me. I am home, she said simply. We all are. And in that moment, watching the sunset paint the Academy in shades of gold, I realized that karma hadn't just come full circle. It had spiraled upward, lifting us all to something higher than we'd ever imagined. The lost little girl I'd chosen to love had become the woman who taught us all how to love better. And that was the greatest revenge of all.
I stood in front of the floor-length mirror, adjusting my silk dress one last time. The mother of the groom dress I'd spent weeks choosing suddenly felt like a costume. My hands trembled as I smoothed down the fabric, remembering how Natalia had sneered when I mentioned I'd be wearing navy blue. How appropriate, she'd said, her voice dripping with disdain. I'm Kendall, and today my stepson is getting married. For 15 years, I've been more of a mother to him than his birth mother ever was, but you wouldn't know it from the wedding preparations. 5 minutes until the ceremony. The wedding coordinator's voice echoed through the church hallway. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the powder room. The familiar scent of lilies filled the air. Natalia's choice, of course. She'd steamrolled over Bianca's preference for simple wildflowers, just like she'd done with every other wedding decision. Kendall, Jade, my best friend, hurried toward me in her burgundy bridesmaid dress. You look stunning. Thanks, I whispered, forcing a smile. Have you seen Liam? He's with his mother. The way Jade emphasized mother made my stomach clench. They're in the bride's room. Of course they were. I'd learned to expect these little exclusions over the years, but today they stung more than usual. I made my way to the ceremony, taking my assigned seat in the second row. Shane, my husband, squeezed my hand as I sat down. You okay? He murmured. Before I could answer, the music started. Bianca looked radiant walking down the aisle, but my eyes were fixed on Liam, my boy, the same kid who'd crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who'd helped me in my first restaurant's kitchen, who'd called me Mom until Natalia put a stop to it. The ceremony was beautiful, despite Natalia's theatrical sniffling from the front row. Everything went perfectly until the reception. I should have known something was wrong when Liam avoided my gaze during the family photos. When the photographer called for mother and son shots, Natalia practically sprinted forward, shooting me a triumphant look. Actually, I said, stepping forward, maybe we could do one with both. Mom's fine, Liam cut in, his voice sharp. Just Mom. The silence that followed was deafening. I felt every eye in the room on me as I stepped back, my cheeks burning. But that was just the beginning. During the reception, I watched Liam approach the microphone for his speech. My heart swelled with pride, remembering the nervous teenager who'd once been terrified of public speaking. I want to thank everyone for being here today, he began, his voice strong and clear. Especially my mother, who's always been there for me, who's shaped me into the man I am today. I smiled, touched until I realized he was looking directly at Natalia. And I need to address something, he continued. There's been some confusion over the years, but I want to make it clear. I have one mother, and that's Natalia Peters. Kendall might be married to my father, but she's not my mother. She never was, and she never will be. The champagne glass nearly slipped from my fingers. Across the room, Natalia was beaming, tears streaming down her face. Shane's hand found mine under the table, but I pulled away. I'm sorry if that hurts anyone's feelings, Liam added, not sounding sorry at all. But it's time to set the record straight. Jade reached for me, but I was already standing. The room spun as I made my way to the exit, past the whispers and stares. Behind me, I heard Bianca calling Liam's name in a shocked tone, but I couldn't stop. In the hallway, I ran into Helen, Shane's sister. She caught my arm as I stumbled past. Kendall, wait, she said, her eyes fierce. There's something you need to know. Not now, Helen, I choked out. Yes, now. Her grip tightened. You think you know this family. You don't know anything. But I do. I know why Natalia's always been so threatened by you. Why she's poisoned Liam against you all these years. I tried to pull away, but her next words froze me in place. What would precious Natalia do if everyone knew the truth about Liam's real father? The world stopped spinning. I stared at Helen, my heart pounding in my ears. What are you talking about? Helen's smile was sharp as broken glass. Meet me tomorrow. I'll tell you everything. I watched her walk away, my mind racing. Behind me, the reception continued, music and laughter spilling into the hallway. 15 years of love and sacrifice, thrown back in my face. But now, for the first time, I had a chance to fight back. The question was, how far was I willing to go? The morning after the wedding, I sat across from Helen at my empty restaurant, watching her stir her third spoonful of sugar into her coffee. The place wouldn't open for hours, but I couldn't risk being overheard. You're probably wondering why I never said anything before, Helen said, tapping her spoon against the rim of her cup. I'm wondering if you're just trying to stir up trouble, I replied. You haven't exactly been a stable presence in this family. Helen laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's what they want everyone to think, isn't it? Crazy Helen, the family embarrassment. Did Shane ever tell you why I stopped coming to family events? I shook my head. Shane rarely talked about his sister. It was right after Liam was born. I caught Natalia with... She paused, taking a sip of coffee. Well, let's just say she wasn't with Shane. That doesn't prove anything, I said, but my hands were shaking as I remembered my first introduction to this family. Remember when you first started dating Shane? Helen asked, as if reading my mind. How Natalia suddenly started showing up at every family dinner every weekend? I did remember. It had been 12 years ago, but the memories were crystal clear. You brought homemade lasagna to that first dinner, Helen continued. Natalia took one look at it and said, We don't eat peasant food in this house, I finished. Then she ordered takeout from that expensive Italian place. She was marking her territory. She knew you were different. You actually cared about Liam, not just appearances. A knock at the restaurant's window made us both jump. It was Jade, right on time. I'd asked her to come. I needed a witness I could trust. Sorry I'm late, Jade said as I let her in. Traffic was... Helen, what are you doing here? Telling truths that should have been told years ago, Helen replied. Jade looked at me questioningly as she sat down. I nodded, silently asking her to listen. I have proof, Helen said, pulling out her phone. Emails, text messages, photos. Natalia wasn't as careful back then as she thought. She slid the phone across the table. The timestamps on the messages were from 25 years ago, but the content made my stomach turn. That's not all, Helen continued. Remember last Christmas, when Liam had that health scare? I did. He'd needed a blood transfusion after a car accident. Shane hadn't been a match. The doctors said that happens sometimes, I said weakly. It happens when the father isn't the father, Helen corrected. Shane knows. He's always known. Why do you think he drinks so much at family functions? If this is true, Jade interrupted, why tell Kendall now? Helen's face softened. Because I watched you yesterday, Kendall. I watched you love that boy for 15 years. I watched you show up to every game, every graduation, every milestone. I watched you build this restaurant from nothing while Natalia used her family's money to tear you down. And yesterday, I watched that kid break your heart because his mother poisoned him against you. Tears burned in my eyes. He was only 10 when I married Shane. He used to... I swallowed hard. He used to call me Mom when Natalia wasn't around. Until she found out, Helen finished. Then suddenly you were just Kendall, or my dad's wife. I remember that summer, Jade said quietly. You cried for days. Natalia's been so afraid of losing her grip on Liam that she's spent years making sure you could never threaten her position, Helen said. But she's the fraud, not you. My phone buzzed. A text from Shane. Where are you? We need to talk about yesterday. What am I supposed to do with this information? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. That's up to you, Helen said, standing. But remember, Natalia's power comes from appearances, and now you know what's behind them. After Helen left, Jade moved to sit beside me. Are you okay? No, I admitted. I keep thinking about all the times Natalia called me an outsider, a gold digger, all the times she told Liam I was trying to replace her. She knew the whole time she was the one living a lie. What are you going to do? I looked at my phone, at Shane's message waiting for a response, at the wedding photos already popping up on social media, showing the perfect family moment when Liam had publicly rejected me. I don't know, I said, but I'm done being the villain in their story. Jade squeezed my hand. Whatever you decide, I'm here. I nodded, thinking of the way Liam had looked at me yesterday, with such practiced disdain, thinking of all the years Natalia had spent crafting that moment. Helen's right about one thing, I said finally. This family runs on appearances. Maybe it's time someone shattered them. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Shane. Natalia's asking about you. Says she wants to clear the air. I bet she does, I thought, closing my eyes. After all these years of playing by their rules, maybe it was time to write my own. I sat in my car outside Natalia's sprawling mansion. Helen's phone clutched in my hand. She'd given it to me before leaving the restaurant, saying I might need the evidence. Now, watching Natalia's silhouette move behind gauzy curtains, I felt my resolve strengthen. The front door opened before I could knock. Natalia stood there in a cream-colored cashmere sweater, perfect makeup hiding any signs of yesterday's celebrations. Kendall, she said, her voice honey-sweet, I'm so glad you came. I followed her into the living room, where Shane sat nursing what looked like scotch, at 2 p.m. Darling, he said, standing awkwardly, we've been worried. Have you? I kept my voice neutral. That's interesting. Natalia perched on the edge of her designer sofa. About yesterday. I know Liam's speech must have hurt you, but you have to understand. Oh, I understand plenty, I cut in. In fact, I had a fascinating conversation with Helen this morning. The glass in Shane's hand trembled slightly. Natalia's smile froze. Helen, she said, I wasn't aware she was in town. She never left. She's been watching this family's performance for years. I pulled out Helen's phone. She kept excellent records. Shane set his glass down hard enough to slosh liquid over the rim. Whatever Helen told you, is it true? I turned to face my husband. Did you know? All this time, did you know Liam wasn't yours? The silence that followed was deafening. Natalia's face had gone chalk white. Those are dangerous accusations, she finally said, but her voice shook. Answer me, Shane. He wouldn't meet my eyes. It was complicated. Complicated? I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. Was it complicated when you watched me try to be a mother to your son for 15 years? Was it complicated when you let Natalia tear me down again and again, knowing she was living a lie? You don't understand, Natalia started. Show me the messages, or I'll show them to everyone else. I held up Helen's phone. Your choice. Natalia's composure cracked. Fine. Yes, okay. Michael was... We were in love, but he was married, and my family would have cut me off if they knew. Shane agreed to help. For a price, I guessed, looking at my husband. What did they offer you? Money? Status? Shane took another drink. Her father got me the partnership at the firm. The pieces clicked into place. The country club membership, the sudden promotion, the way Shane had always deferred to Natalia's family. Does Liam know? Of course not, Natalia snapped, and he never will. It would destroy him. Like you destroyed me yesterday. I stood up. Like you've been destroying me for years. That was different, she protested. I had to protect my relationship with my son by making him hate me, by turning every act of love I showed him into something sinister. Please, Shane said, finally finding his voice. Think about what this would do to Liam, to the family. Family? I turned on him. You mean the family that stood by while your son humiliated me at his wedding? The family that's been living a lie for 25 years? What do you want? Natalia asked, her voice small. I pulled out my phone and played the recording of our entire conversation. Natalia's face went from white to grey. You recorded us. I learned from the best, I said. You taught me all about protecting myself, remember? Name your price, she whispered. I don't want your money. I walked to the door, then turned back. I want you to remember this moment. Remember that I know. Remember that every time you try to hurt me or push me out, I have the power to bring everything crashing down. You wouldn't, Shane said. Think about Liam. I have thought about Liam. For 15 years, he's all I've thought about. I met Natalia's eyes. The question is, have you? Have you thought about what your lies have done to him? Or were you too busy protecting your own image? I left them there. Natalia collapsed on her sofa, Shane standing helplessly beside her. In my car, my hands shook as I called Jade. How did it go? She asked. It's true, all of it. I started the engine. They admitted everything. Are you going to tell Liam? I thought about his face at the wedding, the carefully crafted disdain. Thought about all the years of manipulation that had created that moment. I don't know yet, I said honestly, but I'm done being their victim. As I drove away from Natalia's perfect house, with its perfect facade hiding decades of lies, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power. The question was, what would I do with it? Shane was waiting in our kitchen when I got home, a half-empty bottle of scotch on the counter. His tie was loose, his hair disheveled, a far cry from the polished lawyer everyone else saw. We need to talk, he said. Now you want to talk? I grabbed a wine glass from the cabinet. 15 years of watching me try to be a mother to your son. Sorry, Natalia's son, and now you want to talk. I know I should have told you. Should have? The wine bottle clinked hard against the glass. You watched me build a relationship with Liam. You watched Natalia systematically destroy it. And you said nothing. It wasn't that simple. Stop saying that. The glass slammed down on the counter. It was exactly that simple. You chose money and status over honesty, over me. Shane ran his hands through his hair. What do you want me to say? That I was a coward? Fine, I was a coward. I still am. At least you're finally being honest. Kendall, please. He reached for me, but I stepped back. Whatever you're planning to do with that recording, you mean like what Natalia's been doing to me for years, manipulating, threatening. This is different. Why? Because it's happening to you. The doorbell rang. Through the glass, I saw Liam standing on our porch. Shane's face went pale. Don't, he whispered. I opened the door. Liam stood there in his honeymoon clothes, looking uncertain. Can we talk? He asked. I stepped aside to let him in. He noticed Shane and frowned. Dad? What are you doing here? I live here, Shane said weakly. You're supposed to be at the airport with Mom, seeing us off. Liam's eyes narrowed. What's going on? I poured another glass of wine, sliding it across the counter to Liam. Interesting choice of words. Mom, Don't, Shane warned again. Don't what? Liam looked between us. What's happening? Your father and I were just discussing family, I said. Specifically, how far people will go to protect their image of a perfect one. If this is about what I said at the wedding, it's about what everyone's been saying, and not saying, for 25 years. Shane stepped forward. Kendall, think about what you're doing. Like you thought about what you were doing when you married me without telling me the truth. What truth? Liam demanded. The moment hung there, heavy with 2 decades of lies. I looked at Liam, really looked at him. The shape of his eyes, the set of his jaw. None of it was Shane's. Your mother came to see me today, I said finally, to clear the air about the wedding. She told me she was going to apologize, Liam said, for how things got out of hand. I laughed. Is that what she called it? Things getting out of hand? Kendall, Shane pleaded. No. I turned to Liam. You want to know why your mother has spent 15 years making sure you never got too close to me? Why she's been so desperate to maintain control? Stop, Shane said, but his voice was weak. Because she's been protecting her biggest lie. I pulled out my phone. Want to hear it? Don't do this, Shane whispered. Liam's face had gone still. Play it. I pressed play. Natalia's voice filled the kitchen, confessing everything. Shane's face crumpled as his own voice joined in, admitting to the decades-long deception. When it finished, Liam didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at his glass of wine. Liam, Shane started. Don't. Liam's voice was ice. Don't touch me. Don't speak to me. Your mother. Which one? Liam laughed, a horrible broken sound. The one who's been lying to me my whole life, or the one I publicly humiliated because the first one told me to? He turned to me, his eyes bright with unshed tears. Did you know? Before today? Helen told me this morning. Helen. He shook his head. The crazy aunt who isn't actually my aunt. Because nothing in my life is what I thought it was. Son. Shane reached for him. I said, don't touch me. Liam knocked the wineglass over, red liquid spreading across the counter like blood. I need to. He stumbled toward the door. I started to follow, but he held up his hand. Don't. Please, I need time. The door slammed behind him. Shane slumped against the counter, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Are you happy now? He asked. Happy? I stared at the spilled wine. No, but at least I'm not lying anymore. My phone buzzed. Natalia calling. I declined it, watching as text messages started flooding in. Threats, probably. Please. Too little. Too late. He'll never forgive any of us, Shane said. Maybe not, I agreed, but at least now he can make that choice based on the truth. I left Shane in the kitchen with his scotch and guilt, heading upstairs to pack a bag. I couldn't stay here tonight, watching the family I thought I had dissolve in a pool of decades-old lies. The truth was out. Now we all had to live with the consequences. 3 days after the revelation, I was wiping down tables at my restaurant when Bianca walked in. She looked exhausted, still in her honeymoon clothes. We came back early, she said, sliding into a booth. Liam couldn't pretend everything was normal. I poured her a cup of coffee. How is he? Destroyed. She wrapped her hands around the mug. He spent 2 days just staring at old family photos, like he was trying to see the lies in them. I'm sorry. Are you? Her eyes met mine. Really? I'm sorry he's hurting. I'm not sorry for telling the truth. Jade emerged from the kitchen, stopping short when she saw Bianca. Oh, I'll come back. Stay, Bianca said. I actually wanted to talk to both of you. Jade sat beside me, her hand finding mine under the table. Natalia showed up at our hotel this morning, Bianca continued. She was different, broken. She told Liam everything. Everything? About Michael, his real father, about the arrangement with Shane, about how she's been... Bianca paused, choosing her words carefully, manipulating things, with you. My throat tightened. Did she tell him why? She said she was terrified of losing him, that watching you become his mother figure made her crazy with jealousy. Bianca took a sip of coffee. She admitted to poisoning him against you, said she'd been doing it since you married Shane. I knew that part, I said quietly. But did you know Liam used to cry himself to sleep after she told him he couldn't call you Mom anymore? That she threatened to send him to boarding school if he got too close to you? The pain was fresh again, sharp as broken glass. No. He told me everything last night. How much he loved you, how confused he was when his mother kept telling him you were trying to steal him away. Bianca's voice cracked. He said the wedding speech was her idea. She told him it would prove his loyalty once and for all. Jesus, Jade whispered. Where is he now? I asked. At Helen's, actually. She's been helpful, filling in the blanks. My phone buzzed. Another text from Shane. I'd been staying at Jade's, ignoring his messages. He's been calling Liam too, Bianca said, noticing. Liam won't answer. Can you blame him? No. She straightened up. But that's not why I'm here. The wedding reception, the real one, is tomorrow night. I blinked. What? The country club event. The one Natalia planned for all their society friends who couldn't make it to the actual wedding. Her smile was bitter. She's been reminding everyone about it all year. Surely she's cancelling it. She can't. Too many important people coming. Family reputation to maintain. Bianca's voice dripped sarcasm. But Liam wants you there. Me? Why? Because he's giving a speech, a real one this time. She stood up, dropping a business card on the table. That's the address, 7 o'clock. Bianca, I called as she reached the door. Why are you doing this? She turned back. Because I love him, and because I've spent the last 3 days watching him realize his whole life was built on lies, except for you. You were the only real thing in it. After she left, Jade picked up the business card. Are you going? I don't know. I stared at my phone, at Shane's unanswered messages. Should I? What does your heart say? My heart? I laughed humorlessly. My heart is still trying to process everything. Then process this, Jade said firmly. That boy is drowning in lies and betrayal. He needs something real to hold on to. I'm the one who blew his world apart. No, honey. You're the one who finally let the truth in. My phone buzzed again, Natalia this time. The text was short. Please come tomorrow. Let him say what he needs to say. It could be another trap, I said. Could be, Jade agreed, but it could also be a chance for healing. I thought about Liam as a child, crawling into my bed during storms, about teaching him to cook in this very kitchen, about all the love I'd given freely, never expecting anything in return. If I go, I said slowly, will you come with me? Try and stop me. Jade squeezed my hand. Besides, someone needs to keep you from dumping wine on Natalia's designer dress. That was one time. The Christmas party of 2019, I remember it well. We laughed, and for a moment, the weight lifted. Then my phone buzzed one more time. A text from Liam himself, the first since that night in my kitchen. I understand if you don't come tomorrow, but I hope you do. I have things I need to say. Things I should have said years ago. I showed Jade the message. Well, she said, looks like we need to find you something to wear. I nodded, my heart racing. Tomorrow night I'd walk back into the lion's den. But this time, I wouldn't be walking in blind. This time, I had the truth on my side. The country club ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and old money. Jade and I stood at the entrance, my heart pounding beneath my emerald silk dress. You can still back out, Jade whispered. No, I said, watching Natalia flit between guests in a designer gown. I can't. We made our way inside. The whispers started immediately. The society wives who'd witnessed my humiliation at the wedding couldn't believe I'd shown my face again. Kendall. Helen appeared beside me, champagne in hand. You came. Is Liam here? Getting ready in the library. He's... She paused. Different. Stronger, maybe. Shane materialized from the crowd, stopping short when he saw me. He looked haggard, his usual polish dulled by days of guilt and scotch. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. "Don't," I warned. "Kendall, please, we need to—" "Ladies and gentlemen," the event coordinator's voice cut through the tension, "please take your seats for dinner." I ended up at a table with Jade and Helen, as far from Shane as possible. Natalia sat at the head table, her perfect mask showing cracks around the edges. Bianca sat beside her, back straight, eyes forward. "Where's Liam?" someone whispered loudly. As if on cue, he appeared at the microphone. The room fell silent. "I know you're all expecting another wedding speech," he began, his voice steady. "But this isn't that kind of night." Natalia's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. 3 days ago, I learned that my entire life was built on lies. His words cut through the room like a knife. I learned that the man I called father isn't my biological father, that my mother orchestrated a decades-long deception to maintain her social standing. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Shane stared at his plate. Natalia's face had gone white. "But that's not the worst part," Liam continued. "The worst part is what those lies made me do, what they made me become." His eyes found mine across the room. "Kendall," he said, and my heart stopped. "When I was 10 years old, you came into my life. You taught me to cook. You helped me with my science projects. You showed up to every game, every performance, every moment that mattered." Tears pricked at my eyes. "And I repaid that love with cruelty," his voice cracked, "because my mother, my biological mother, convinced me that your love was a threat, that I had to choose between you and her." Natalia stood up, swaying slightly. "Liam, please." "No, Mom, you don't get to stop this, not anymore." He turned back to me. "At my wedding, I said things that can never be unsaid. I hurt you in ways I can never fully repair. And I did it because I was too weak, too afraid to stand up to the lies I'd been fed my whole life." The room was dead silent now, every eye either on Liam or me. "I don't expect forgiveness," he continued. "I don't deserve it. But I need you to know that you were the mother I needed. The mother who loved me without conditions, without manipulation, without agenda. And I threw that love away because I was too blind to see the truth." Jade squeezed my hand under the table as tears rolled down my cheeks. "To everyone here tonight," Liam's voice strengthened, "you came expecting to celebrate a perfect family. But perfection built on lies isn't perfection at all. It's just another lie." He stepped away from the microphone, then stopped and turned back. "Kendall," he said, his voice raw, "I'm sorry for everything, and—" He swallowed hard. "I love you, Mom." The room erupted in whispers. Natalia collapsed back into her chair. Shane was openly crying now. Liam walked straight to our table. Without a word, he knelt beside my chair. "I understand if you can't forgive me," he whispered, "but please know that every word was true." I pulled him into my arms, feeling him shake with silent sobs. "I forgive you," I whispered back. "I forgave you the moment you were born." Around us, the perfect society event dissolved into chaos. Guests whispered and pointed. Someone dropped a glass. Natalia fled the room, Bianca following close behind, but none of it mattered. All that mattered was this moment, this truth, this love that had survived years of lies and manipulation. "What happens now?" Liam asked, pulling back to look at me. "Now?" I smiled through my tears. "Now we start over. No more lies, no more perfect facades. Just truth." "And family," he added. "Real family." Helen raised her champagne glass. "To truth," she said loudly, "and to the death of perfect lies." One by one, other glasses raised. Jade's, mine, Liam's, even Shane's from across the room. The perfect society wedding reception had become something else entirely, a moment of raw, honest redemption. As Liam sat down beside me, taking my hand in his, I realized something profound. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't destruction at all. Sometimes it's simply letting the truth be heard. The morning after the reception, I was in my restaurant's kitchen, stress baking bread when Natalia walked in. She looked different, No designer clothes, no perfect makeup, just a woman worn down by her own lies. "Your staff let me in," she said quietly. I kept kneading the dough. "What do you want, Natalia?" "To talk, please." I nodded toward the prep counter. She perched awkwardly on a stool, looking out of place among the industrial appliances. "I've never been in your kitchen before," she said. "You made it clear this was beneath you." I made a lot of things clear that weren't true. She watched me work the dough. "Did you know I can't cook? Not a single thing. My mother said it wasn't necessary for someone of our status." "Is that supposed to make me feel sorry for you?" "No." She twisted her wedding ring. "Nothing could make up for what I've done." The back door opened and Liam walked in, stopping short when he saw his mother. "I can come back," he said. "Stay," I told him. "Your mother was just explaining herself." He moved to stand beside me, automatically reaching for an apron. I'd taught him years ago how to tie it properly. "You know how to bake?" Natalia asked, surprised. "Kendall taught me when I was 12. He began measuring ingredients for the next batch. Remember that summer I said I was at soccer camp? I was here instead, learning to make croissants." Natalia's face crumpled. "More lies. You taught me well," Liam said coldly. "I deserve that." "You deserve worse." He slammed the measuring cup down. "Do you know what it's like to realize your whole life was orchestrated? That every time I pulled away from Kendall, every time I hurt her, I was just playing my part in your script. I was trying to protect you. From what? Love? Acceptance? Someone who actually saw me as more than an accessory to their perfect life?" The kitchen door swung open again. This time it was Bianca. "I thought I'd find you both here," she said. "The lawyers are waiting." My hand stilled. "Lawyers?" "For the annulment," Bianca explained. "We're having the marriage annulled. Starting fresh, on honest ground this time." "You don't have to do that," Natalia protested. "Yes, we do." Liam wiped flour from his hands. "Everything about that wedding was built on lies. The speech you made me give, the way you orchestrated every detail to maintain your image, the way you tried to make Bianca feel as inadequate as you made me feel," I added. Natalia flinched. "I never meant—" "Yes, you did," Bianca cut in. "But it didn't work. Because Liam and I, we're real. Unlike everything you created." "When's the new wedding?" I asked. 3 months, Liam said. "Small ceremony. No society pages, no country club. Just family. Real family." He looked at me meaningfully. My heart swelled. "And me?" Natalia's voice was small. "Will I be invited?" "That depends," Liam said. "Are you ready to be real? To stop manipulating and controlling? To accept that Kendall is as much my mother as you are, maybe more?" Tears spilled down Natalia's cheeks. "I don't know how to be real anymore." "Then learn," Bianca said firmly. "Get therapy. Deal with whatever made you need control so badly that you destroyed everyone around you." "Starting with telling Michael the truth," Liam added. "My real father deserves to know." Natalia nodded slowly. "He's in Seattle now. I found him last night." "Good." Liam turned back to the bread dough. "That's a start." "The lawyers are waiting," Bianca reminded him gently. He looked at me. "Will you come with us?" "Of course." Natalia stood, smoothing her wrinkled clothes. "I should go." "Mom," Liam called as she reached the door. She turned, hope flickering across her face. "When you're ready, really ready, to be honest, to be real, call me." She nodded, tears falling freely now, and left. "Are you okay?" I asked Liam. He looked at the half-kneaded dough, at Bianca, at me. "No, but I will be. We all will be." "The bread can wait," I said, untying my apron. "Actually," Bianca smiled, "could you teach me? After the lawyers, I mean. Liam talks about your baking lessons like they were magic." "They were," Liam said softly. "They still are." I hugged them both, flour dust and all. "Then we'll make magic together. A fresh start, with honest ingredients." As we headed to meet the lawyers, I thought about how revenge had transformed into something else entirely. Not the destruction of a perfect facade, but the building of something real in its place. Something made of truth and love, and maybe even a little bit of magic. Just like my bread. The autumn breeze carried the scent of fresh bread through my restaurant's open windows as I arranged flowers on the tables. Simple wildflowers. Bianca's choice this time, not Natalia's. Need help? Shane stood in the doorway, looking uncertain. You can start with the centerpieces. I handed him a vase. Just don't expect me to forget everything because you're helping with wedding preparations. I wouldn't dream of it. He placed the flowers carefully. The divorce papers came through yesterday. I know, Helen told me. Are you happy? I paused, considering. I'm free. That's better than happy. The kitchen door swung open and Liam emerged, flour dusting his chef's whites. The bread's done. Bianca's finishing the last batch of pastries. You taught her well, Shane said. Kendall taught us both well, Liam corrected. The door chimed and Natalia walked in, looking different than she had 3 months ago. Simpler, more human. The therapist said I should come, she said. If that's okay. I nodded. There's bread that needs slicing in the kitchen. She hesitated, then rolled up her sleeves and disappeared through the swinging door. That's new, Shane commented. She's trying, Liam said. Actually trying, not just performing. Helen burst in, arms full of fairy lights. The garden's ready. Jade's supervising the setup. A garden wedding, Shane mused. Not exactly the society pages. That's the point, Liam said. Real, not perfect. I watched through the kitchen window as Natalia awkwardly sliced bread, Bianca gently correcting her technique. No designer clothes, no perfect makeup, just 2 women finding their way to something authentic. I should check on them, Liam said, heading back to the kitchen. He's happy, Shane observed. Really happy, not just playing the part. Because he's finally free to be himself. Thanks to you. No, I corrected. Thanks to truth. The afternoon flowed into evening. Guests arrived, not society figures this time, but real friends, real family. The garden glowed with fairy lights as Liam and Bianca exchanged honest vows under a canopy of stars. During the reception, held in my restaurant, Natalia approached my table. The bread is perfect, she said. I never knew. I never let myself know how much work goes into creating something real. It's never too late to learn, she nodded. Michael, Liam's father, he's coming next week. To meet him properly. How do you feel about that? Terrified, relieved, like maybe I can finally stop pretending. The music changed, and Liam appeared beside us. Mom, he said, looking at me. Dance with me? As we swayed under the fairy lights, I saw Shane and Helen talking quietly in a corner. Natalia teaching Bianca's young cousin how to properly hold a bread knife, Jade directing the catering staff with her usual efficiency. Thank you, Liam said suddenly. For what? For not giving up on me. For showing me what real love looks like. He smiled. For teaching me that perfect isn't the same as true. Speaking of true, I nodded toward the door where a tall man had just walked in, looking nervous. I think that's Michael. Liam tensed, then relaxed. Would you come with me? To meet him? Are you sure? Natalia is learning to share. He squeezed my hand. I have room in my heart for all my parents, the ones who gave me life, and the one who taught me how to live it. We walked together toward Michael, toward truth, toward whatever came next. Behind us, the fairy lights twinkled, the bread filled the air with warmth, and love, real love, filled every corner of the room. Ready? I asked. Liam took a deep breath. Ready. As we approached Michael, I realized something profound. Revenge hadn't destroyed this family. It had transformed it. Like bread dough, under gentle hands, it had been kneaded and shaped into something new, something real. Not perfect, not flawless, but true. And in the end, that was better than any revenge could ever be. Hi, Liam said to Michael. I'm your son. Michael's eyes filled with tears. I know, he said. I've always known. I started to step away, but Liam held on to my hand. And this, he said proudly, is my mum. Around us, the wedding celebration continued, not a performance this time, but a genuine celebration of love in all its imperfect, beautiful forms. The revenge I'd sought had given way to something far more powerful, the truth that had set us all free.